Now, today, we are gonna see, what if Harry Potter was raised by evil Minerva? Join Patreon for early ACESS of Super Op stories, also adult and steamy Harry Potter stories too. Please subscribe this channel, because definitely I will try my best to provide a valuable content for you all. Also check the description to support the original author for this beautiful creation. Mama, the cry of an upset infant pierced through the silent night. No less than a minute later, an elderly woman was by the infant's side, gently picking him up and affectionately cradling him in her arms, soothing his cries of distress. This was not the first time tonight that the child has called his new caregiver to his side. Ever since Minerva McGonagall laid the babe in his crib earlier that evening. The infant had woken up crying for his mother every few hours. Although the child was just over a year old, he somehow knew that the bed that he slept in was new, as was his current surroundings. Confused and scared, he cried for a familiar face, a reassuring voice that he had heard so many times before and yet now refused to answer him. Instead, there was a new voice. One that was different from his, Mama, and yet carried the same underlying love and comfort that he was used to. It will take some time for the child to grow accustomed to this new voice, but he'll eventually learn to accept and even grow to love the stern deputy headmistress of Hogwarts. As sleep and tiredness won over fear and unrest, Harry's cries dampened until they became rhythmic waves of deep breaths. Minerva then carefully placed the sleeping child back into his crib and covered him with a soft blue blanket. She ventured that this would not be the last time the child would wake tonight. So instead of going to her own bed in the next room, she returned to her previous position in a comfortable chair and propped her feet up on an ottoman. A little soreness in the morning is a small price for the comfort she would provide for the little boy who was struggling through his first night at Hogwarts. It would be easier on herself to just move Harry's cot next to her own bed, but he knew that the more Harry grew accustomed to his surroundings, the easier the transition it will be for him. The child needed stability, and Minerva was not going to shift the child from room to room. Just so she could sleep more comfortably herself, especially not after all the boy had to go through for the past 48 hours. As she closed her eyes and snuggled under a warm blanket in her chair, she couldn't help but think how different things had been just 2 nights ago. Who must not be named was as powerful as ever, and the Potters were in hiding, but Harry was happily living with both his parents. When the attack at Godric's Hollow happened, Minerva was among the first wave of people to find out. That was one of the advantages of being in the Order and working beside who some would consider the most powerful wizard alive. She was always informed of Albus Dumbledore's whereabouts and thus was aware of events in the wizarding world. She had barely enough time to overcome her shock of learning of the Potter's death when she heard rumors that the child, Harry, had not only miraculously survived a killing curse from he who must not be named, but somehow reflected the curse back onto the caster. She quickly apparated to the address that Albus had left for her earlier to learn the truth to the rumors. She was shocked to discover that Albus wanted to leave the boy with his Muggle relatives, as she had seen firsthand how horrible they were. Although Harry was unrelated to her by blood, she had known his parents for half of their lives, first as students and later as colleagues in the Order. She was fond of Lily Evans Potter for her intelligence and was often amused by James Potter's pranks, although she would venomously deny it if ever confronted. Despite her many arguments for him to reconsider, the headmaster remained adamant with his decision to leave the boy with his relatives. Minerva disagreed with the arrangement but trusted the headmaster enough to respect his decisions. In return, Albus promised her that he will personally keep an eye on the boy while he was under the care of his relatives and remove him immediately if he felt that the child would be harmed in any way. Surely, after 24 hours of being ignored and crying himself red and hoarse, Harry was personally placed in Minerva's arm by Albus Dumbledore himself. Even as determined as he was to leave the boy with his relatives, Albus could see how easily the boy would become ill and neglected if left under the care of his relatives. Thus, Harry Potter became the newest and youngest resident at Hogwarts under the care of Minerva McGonagall. Everything seemed to return to normal in the wizarding world as people celebrated the downfall of he who must not be named. The whole Wizarding community was given 2 weeks' break to reunite with families and try to resume the peaceful lives that they lived before Voldemort. Chapter 2. Before dawn the following morning, Harry woke up to a wet bottom. He whimpered pathetically, as he no longer had the energy to cry out loud anymore. As his calls for attention were too quiet to be heard, he tried a little harder and kicked his legs around as an attempt to remove himself from the discomfort. Minerva McGonagall stirred in her sleep as her sensitive ears heard a noise. Her eyes opened slowly as her brain attempted to pinpoint the source of the noise. As she turned her head, she saw the cot and movements inside it. Despite wanting more sleep, she forced herself to get up and check on the child. "Hello, Harry," Minerva softly cooed to the boy. After changing the infant, she carried him back to her chair, hoping she can get the boy to sleep for a few more hours, not only for his own benefit but also hers. Cradling the child close to her chest, she rocked him soothingly back and forth, her eyes closed but not asleep. However, sleep was far from Harry's mind. Curious about his new surroundings, he could not take his eyes off of this stranger. He didn't recognize her face, but her voice sounded vaguely familiar, the same one in fact, who answered when he wanted his mama so badly. During the night, his thoughts reminded him of his longing to see a familiar and comforting face. He had not seen his mama or Da for a long time, far longer than he was used to. He remembered the previous day when he cried and cried for either of his parents. That was the longest time he ever had to cry without anyone responding to him. He not only missed his mama and Da, but was left all alone in a room the entire time. That had never happened to him before. His wails were fueled with fear and loneliness, long after his energy deserted him. The rocking was starting to take its effect, but the child fought it in order to get an answer to a question he had for 2 days. "Mama," quote. It was obvious from the small, coarse voice that the crying from the previous day and sporadically through the night had taken its toll on the small distressed child. Upon hearing the plea, Minerva opened her eyes and saw large green eyes shining with misery and longing. Her heart ached. She stopped cradling the child and instead, let him lean against her eyed as she seated him upright on her lap. The green eyes never left her. Wishing wholeheartedly that she could give another answer, she instead said, "I'm sorry, Harry, but your mum is not with us anymore. She's in heaven with your dad." Harry didn't understand. "Da," he tried. "No dear, your dad is not here either." He didn't understand the words, only that neither were there. He was miserable and expressed it the only way he knew how. It wasn't so much as the loudness of the cries, or lack of in Harry's case, that worried Minerva, it was the pain behind the cries. Worried that any more crying will result in serious repercussions on the boy's larynx, Minerva once again cradled the boy and gently rocked him. "Shush, please stop, Harry, you have me, you'll always have me." When the crying didn't stop, McGonagall continued coaxing the child. "You'll also have Dumbledore, who I'm sure will care for you as much as I do, if not more. Then there'll be Pomfrey, Sprout, and Flickwick, who I'm afraid will all spoil you if left to their own devices. You will be loved, dear child, in the same way that your parents would have loved you." Her touching words, however, fell on deaf ears. Ready to flow poppy for some mild calming draught, Minerva's eyes, instead, were caught on a card lying on the mantel. It was a thank you card from Lily and James, for the present that she and Albus bought for Harry when they visited him in the hospital. Included in the card was a photo of the new family, taken by Remus in Harry's nursery. Minerva walked to the mantel, and held the picture for the child in her arms to see. The picture had just the effect that Minerva was hoping for. Harry was mesmerized by the familiar figures waving at him with happy grins on their faces. He stopped his fuss and reached for the photo in Minerva's hands. She gladly gave it to him. "Yes, Harry, those are your parents. I've never seen them happier than they were when you were around them." Minerva took advantage of the distraction to place the boy back in his crib. She covered him up and watched as the little boy quickly fell back asleep, with the picture clutched in his hands. Minerva crawled under the covers on her own bed and fell into a deep, undisturbed sleep. Since day on, the picture was never far from Harry's bed. Chapter 3 Bath Time. 4 hours later, Minerva awoke for the second time that morning. All the students returned home to celebrate with their families. Minerva decided to have breakfast in her own rooms with Harry. She rang for a house elf and breakfast was promptly brought to her cozy sitting room as requested. Before she could step into the bathroom for a quick shower, movements inside Harry's crib drew her attention. Harry was waking up and it looked like she would not be able to shower this morning. She greeted Harry once again and proceeded to change and dress him. Harry had nothing with him when he was left with the Dursleys, so naturally, Minerva had nothing for the child. She decided that Harry's supplies would need to be taken care of today. After transfiguring a pair of soft maroon pajamas into a warm sleeper, she fortunately dressed the boy without much fuss. "You must be hungry, Harry. Let's get you something to eat." She noticed that the photo was still in his hands. Realizing that the picture would likely be damaged by the end of the day, she quickly made several duplicates and framed one next to Harry's crib. Minerva carried the child to the table and held him in place on her lap. Breakfast was long and difficult as Harry refused to eat much of the porridge provided. McGonagall had difficulty trying to eat herself along with feeding a child who wasn't interested in eating. Halfway through their first meal together, there was a knock at her door. A quick look at the clock made Minerva guess that it was the headmaster at the door. When she first arrived to teach, the newly appointed headmaster offered to walk her to the Great Hall for breakfast as a welcoming gesture. The gesture turned into a habit, and after nearly 36 years of teaching, there weren't very many mornings when the Transfiguration professor would not be escorted to breakfast by the headmaster. Leaving the table quickly to answer the door, the visitor did indeed reveal himself to be the headmaster. "Good morning, Professor Dumbledore. Perhaps you've forgotten that all the students left for home yesterday, so there's no need to dine in the Great Hall." "Good morning, Professor McGonagall. Ah, I realize that the students are gone, but old habits are difficult to break." The sound of a spoon dropping on the floor caught the attention of the two professors. "Forgive me for not greeting you earlier, Mr. Potter. Enjoying your breakfast, I see," the headmaster directed towards the boy with a twinkle in his eyes. The mischievous young boy had been playing with his porridge and had the substance smeared across his face as well as his hands. "Harry Potter," a female voice behind Dumbledore scolded. "Honestly, just like your father, you can't be left alone for 2 minutes without causing some form of trouble." Despite her bit harsher tone with the boy, Albus could tell that Minerva was not really angry at the boy. In fact, she even looked a bit amused at the boy and his mess. The headmaster then stayed to give Harry a bath while Minerva made a list of items she wanted from Hogsmeade and sent a house elf to get them. When Albus and a towel-wrapped Harry returned from the bathroom, they had a surprise for Minerva. Min, Harry shouted from Dumbledore's arm. As he spotted Minerva in the living room, Minerva turned around in surprise when she heard her childhood nickname being called. She saw Harry reaching for her and gladly took the child in her arms. "Oh Harry, my name is Minerva," she said softly as she cuddled the boy against her. "I tried telling him that while he was in the tub. Apparently, your name is much too difficult for a 1-year-old to pronounce, so I guess you'll have to settle for Min. What about you, Albus? What are you called?" Just then, Harry reappeared from the crook of Minerva's neck and said in almost perfect pronunciation, "Albus." "Well said, my boy. That was a very good, Harry." As Minerva carried Harry into the bedroom to get dressed, Albus thought he heard her mutter to Harry, "That's the last time you're getting a bath from Albus." Necessary Pains. Chapter 4. Necessary Pains. Hi everyone. I'm sorry for not updating sooner, but I hope you like this. Some people have mentioned that these chapters seem a bit short. I agree, but it would definitely take too long for you guys to wait for a longer chapter. Here's what I have. The next few days followed the same routine. Harry had his meals with Minerva, and Albus frequently joined the pair in Minerva's living quarters. The two professors agreed that it would be better for Harry to be comfortable at least around Minerva before having his meals in the Great Hall. Furthermore, the students were still on break, and in keeping with the consistency routine, the two wanted Harry to experience the Great Hall as it is intended to be used, filled with students and professors. As for Harry, he was becoming accustomed and even rather attached to his new guardian. He cried for his mama less and less and began to use Min more and more frequently, to Minerva's dismay. Over the course of the past few days, Minerva, a person who does not typically display her emotions, found herself becoming more and more protective of her charge. Harry was like the chill and grandchild that she never had, and she took every precaution when it came to his well-being. However, she had no idea of how great of a comfort she was to Harry until a recent visit to Madame Pomfrey. Minerva had planned on taking Harry to Madame Pomfrey, and then pay the headmaster a visit in his office to discuss how she was going to teach and take care of Harry at the same time. After lunch, on the last day before the students returned, Harry was taken to Madame Pomfrey for a checkup to see how the boy was doing. Unfortunately for Harry, it was discovered that he needed an immunization injection. Minerva had brought along a stuffed lion to distract Harry during the examination, but even without having previous experience with young children, even she knew that the toy would unlikely. Why distract the boy from the traumatic experience of being vaccinated? Poppy Pomfrey had been a school nurse for a long time, and she had been told numerous times that her medical skills matched those of the finest healers at St. Muggles. Yet, from the howls coming from the 1-year-old boy, one would think that Poppy Pomfrey had just finished her healer training and had her first patient. The cries were so loud and full of misery that Madame Pomfrey performed a scan with wand after the injection to make sure that there wasn't anything wrong with the vaccination. She had to reassure Minerva that nothing was wrong and that Harry had exceptional lung capacity for a child of his age. Minerva was caught in a bind. She didn't want to carry a screaming child throughout the halls of the school, which could bring out everyone who was at the school to come into the halls to see what all the commotion was all about. Yet, she had to meet Dumbledore for the meeting, which was already later than she had originally planned. In the end, Minerva decided that it would be best for everyone if she remained where she was with Harry until he calmed down enough to not disturb the entire Hogwarts population. Holding Harry upright with her left arm, Minerva walked back and forth in the hospital ward, rubbing small, soothing circles around the child's back with her free arm. While the child clung to her neck and bawled into her shoulder, she softly spoke words of comfort to him, giving the image of a mother comforting a quietly ill child rather than screaming healthy boy. Madame Pomfrey offered her assistance to hold the boy, but it seemed that the cries from the precocious child crescendoed each time she reached out to take him from Minerva's arms. Finally, Madame Pomfrey gave up and returned to her office, asking Minerva to call her if she needed any help. The cries became softer, but the boy still clung tightly to Minerva after 10 minutes in the hospital ward. Her arms were becoming red and the patience that Minerva was never known to have was starting to thin out. Just when she was about to have Poppy send a message to Albus to reschedule the meeting, she heard his voice in the doorway, greeting Madame Pomfrey. As the two walked towards Minerva, Minerva could not have been happier to see anyone else. Harry had become accustomed to Albus, which meant that she could perhaps get some circulation to her soon-to-be numb arms. "Ah, so here you are, Minerva. I was starting to wonder if something was dreadfully wrong with your young charge that prevented you from keeping your appointment this afternoon." "I apologize, Albus." Harry decided to demonstrate his extreme dislike of vaccinations with his unusually powerful larynx in the lungs. "I do hope we didn't keep you waiting too long." "Not at all, my dear. Not at all. From what Poppy told me, it seems that you have managed to calm the boy down significantly. Why don't you let me take him while you let your arms rest? We wouldn't want to prevent our Transfiguration professor from being able to write on the boards tomorrow, would we?" Dumbledore stated with the twinkle brightly sparkling in his eyes. "Thank you for the offer, Albus. I apologize for not coming over to your office earlier. I did not expect Harry to reach so adversely to this visit." "And how could you have known? If my memory serves me correctly, divination was never one of your strengths. In fact, you stopped taking the course as soon as you fulfilled the school's requirement for at least one course." Dumbledore either missed or chose to ignore the look of disdain on McGonagall's face as he mentioned divination. Either way, he turned his attention to Harry, whose face was wet and miserable looking. There, my boy. I'm sure the need low is unpleasant, but I am sure you much prefer it over the disease. Why don't come to me so your can rest?" As he spoke, Minerva gently transferred Harry to Dumbledore. However, as soon as Harry left Minerva's arms, he started crying harder and harder. Despite the magical entertainments that Dumbledore performed to try to distract, Harry kept crying harder and reaching out for Minerva. A calming potion will react with the vaccine. The only option was to let Harry back into Minerva's arms. "I'm sorry, Albus. I don't understand why he is like this today. Usually, he loves being around you. You know that." "Not to worry, Minerva. I'm sure that Harry will be back to himself in no time." Meanwhile, I must commend the boy on his excellent choice of comfort. I, myself, cannot have picked a better choice. I honestly cannot think of no one who has provided as much comfort and joy to me as you, Minerva. Perhaps it was the way the light reflected in the hospital windows, but Albus T. Hot he detected a blush forming on Minerva's cheeks. Well, I shall return back to my work and leave you to Harry, Minerva. Do not worry about the meeting. We can schedule another more convenient time. I'll be sure to ask Madame Pomfrey to bring to you a pain-relieving potion, Minerva. With that, Albus affectionately patted Harry's head and walked towards Madame Pomfrey's office. As he left the two, he couldn't help noticing how natural and comfortable Minerva looked while comforting the boy, as if she would rather be here than doing this than anything else. And you know what? Albus Dumbledore was absolutely correct. Gammy. A.N. Sorry for the delay, guys. I decided that I couldn't stand studying for finals for another day, so I typed up another chapter. I think this will be the final chapter of this story. Don't worry, I want to develop the relationship further and write about how Harry grows up at Hogwarts. It'll come out as a different story. I don't know when the store why will be out though, sad face. I also wanted to edit and improve this story, so I'll be working between these two projects. I hope you guys liked this chapter better than the last one. I'm personally more happy with it, but don't let that affect your reviews. Winking face. Enjoy. Chapter 5 Gammy. As children often adapt easily, Harry began to accept being under the care of McGonagall. After all, what did he have to complain about? He was fed when he was hungry, changed when he was wet, and his nightly whining ensured that he was comfortably rocked to sleep. Sometimes it was the funny man with the white beard that took care of him, but most of the time, it was the pretty lady with green eyes and dark hair. To Harry, she acted like his mama used to. She came when he cried and she took care of him. One day when the L.80 was working at her desk and the old man was sitting on a couch reading a book, Harry was moving around the floor after a flying snitch. It was a toy version of the snitch, and although Minerva Wool D normally disapprove of letting Harry playing with something so small, she allowed it this time since both Albus and herself were there to supervise, not to mention that she had double-checked the arms placed around the toy so that it could not be swallowed. As this was the last day before the students were to return, the two decided to watch up on their work and finalize the details to as to W. Hat they're going to do with Harry during classes. The two worked in silence, but a child's giggles could often be heard in the background. Minerva was glad that Harry was comfortable enough to play on his own and was less clingy than he had been for the past few days. Oomph! Both adults immediately looked up from their work as they heard the exclamation from the child. Luckily, it was just Harry training himself to try to reach the snitch. He had just missed it, but he didn't seem too upset by it. The snitch flew further away from him and Harry crawled after it, heading into the bedroom. A minute later, both adults heard a shriek from the bedroom and immediately dashed into the room. They found Harry sitting on the floor, ignoring the snitch flying above his head and screaming his heart out. Minerva immediately went to Harry as Dumbledore, who already had his wand out, scanned the room for any intruders. Minerva never felt her heart beat faster than it had the minute she heard Harry's scream. "Harry, are you hurt, dear?" In her panic, Minerva forgot she had a wand on her and started to check the boy all over for any injuries. When she didn't find anything wrong, she stood up from her spot, with Harry tightly in her arms. The boy had buried his head in her shoulders and had a fierce grip on her robe. She murmured soft words of comfort and gently rubbed circles around his back as she looked towards Dumbledore. Right after Harry was brought to Hogwarts, the two agreed that Minerva would always stay close to Harry while Dumbledore dealt with the intruders. "It's all right, Minerva. I was scanning the grounds from the window when I was approached by Sir Nicholas. Apparently, he was just flowing through the rooms when he ran into Harry. He meant to tip his head to greet the boy, but that gave the boy such a terrible fright that he thought it would be better for him to leave. When he saw me at the windows, he thought it'd be wise to explain the situation. He sincerely apologizes and hopes that the boy is not too unwell." Minerva let out a breath of relief that she didn't even know she was holding. Now that she knew what was wrong, she could deal with the situation. She looked down at Harry and was disturbed that the boy was still crying very hard. He had his face buried in her robes, but from the cheeks that were unhidden, she could see that they were bright red. Albus, can you please obtain a calming potion from my medicine box? I always keep one around in case a student is in distress. Dumbledore found the potion and brought to the pair, along with a bottle of pumpkin juice. I think 1 drop of the potion in the pumpkin juice will be sufficient for child. Why don't we move to the couch where we would all be more comfortable? Minerva was surprised to find herself still standing at the spot where she found Harry, and quickly that it was a good idea. Once on the couch, the two attempted to coax Harry into coming out from the robe drinking some juice. Harry, my boy, why don't you come to me and drink some of the pumpkin juice that you liked so much last time? Harry peeked out from Minerva's robes, considered it, and then decided that he'd rather stay where he was. At least he stopped crying for a bit there. Here, why don't you let me try? Dumbledore gave Minerva the bottle and she snuck the tip in between Harry's mouth and her robe. With one hand, she held the bottle there, while her other hand was wrapped around the babe and she was gently rocking him. Shish, it's all right, Harry. The ghost is not here anymore. Albus and I are here now and we're both going to make sure that you don't get hurt. You like Albus, don't you, Harry? He always brings you sweets and you play with his beard. And he has that beautiful phoenix fox whose tail you're so fond of pulling. Now, won't you be nice to Albus and try some of the juice that he brought for you? By the end of her conversation, Minerva stopped rocking Harry and waited for him to take the bottle. Harry didn't come out of her robes, but she did feel a tug from the bottle as the child took in the juice. He drank only a couple of sips before he turned away from the bottle again, but it was enough for the calming draught to take effect. What a good boy you are, Harry. Minerva couldn't help but feel a bit of pride as Harry did what she asked. She resumed to the gentle rocking from before. With the bottle now gone, both arms were wrapped tightly around the boy, with one hand gently patting his back in rhythm with her rocking. With the calming potion in his, Harry's breathing slow, wet, and he was resting comfortably now with his face turned towards Dumbledore, his cheeks against Minerva's bosoms. Dumbledore could see that with Minerva's soothing voice and the gently rocking, the boy's eyes were slowly closing. He couldn't help but reach out to wipe away the tear stains on the boy's cheeks. As soon as he did, Harry's big green eyes fluttered open and he watched the headmaster. Dumbledore smiled a grandfatherly smile to the boy and said soft gentle words to the boy to help him sleep. As soon as Harry drifted off, Minerva carefully laid him on the couch and covered him up with a soft tartan blanket. It was an unspoken agreement between the two that both would be more comfortable having the child sleep in front of them rather than in his room, not to mention that Harry would also prefer the former than the latter. The two returned to work, with Dumbledore now sitting in an armchair across from Harry, and were both there to see the child stir from his sleep 2 hours later. When Harry awoke from his nap, he pushed himself upright and used both hands to wipe the sleep from his eyes. He was very happy to see that he was not alone. Albie, Harry exclaimed without stretched arms when he caught the attention of Dumbledore. Dumbledore chuckled at his new name and was glad to pick Harry up as he had requested. It certainly seems like you're in a much better mood, than you were when we put you down 2 hours ago. Perhaps you just needed a nap. Harry sighed contentedly as he sat comfortably on Dumbledore's arm and rested his head on the headmaster's shoulder. Dumbledore knew that Minerva was watching from her desk and walked over to her while carrying Harry. In a playful sing-song tune, Dumbledore told his deputy, "Look who I brought for you, Minerva. A little boy who already has us at his beck and call at the tender age of 1. I'm afraid that he's going to have the whole school at his fingertips if we don't watch out." "Yes, Albus, I agree. However, that's a problem that we're going to have to worry about later." Turning her attention to Harry, she greeted him warmly with a, "Good afternoon, Harry. I see that you had a nice nap." Upon hearing her voice and his name, Harry sat up in Dumbledore's arms and reached out for Minerva. "Mama." Minerva frowned and did not take Harry from Dumbledore. Instead she gently chided the boy. "No, Harry, I am not your mother. Nor will I accept to take her place. I am merely your guardian, here to guide you and protect you until you are of age. I want to make that clear, even if you may not understand that right now." Harry was getting frustrated at not being held by Minerva. He started whimper and squirm in Dumbledore's arms and the headmaster had to use both arms to prevent the boy from falling out. Mama. Harry tried again. Minerva sighed. Harry, I cannot be your mother. For heaven's sake, I'm old enough to be your grandmother. Harry's whimpering was quickly becoming a cry now, and before he could get himself into another fit, Albus quickly stepped in. Minerva, it's obvious that Harry is too young to understand this, so why don't we try it at a later time? Meanwhile, I sincerely doubt that you be merely a guardian to Harry until he's 17. The boy obviously means more to you than just a charge. In fact, you just said yourself that you're old enough to be the boy's grandmother, and I think that's an excellent idea. Harry never really got to know any of his grandparents, and I'm sure that neither James nor Lily would be offended if Harry thought of you as his grandmother. Minerva thought this over and realized that everything that Albus said was true. She really did not feel that it was appropriate for her to take Lily's place, but she was hard-pressed not to play the role of a grandparent to Harry. She never had the chance to have any grandchildren and had several times found herself treating and thinking of Harry as if he was one. It's true what you said, Albus. Harry old be more than just a responsibility to me. She knew that from the moment she saw the tiny green-eyed orphan with the lighting scar fresh from the attack. Excellent then. Now, if you would just move your boisterous grandson out of my hands, or else I fear that I may just drop your precious cargo on the floor. Minerva welcomed Harry into her arms. Harry, I don't know if you like it or not, but I'm going to take care of you as I would my own flesh and blood. I do hope I would make a good grandmother to you, as children often surprise grown-ups with how much they appear to understand. Why choose that exact moment to declare, Grammy. It actually came out as, Gammy, since he wasn't old enough to speak clearly, but in either case, it surprised and flattered the deputy headmistress. Maybe because he heard the word grandmother being used so many times around him, or because he truly was a precocious child. In either case, from that day forth, Minerva had another name to answer to at Hogwarts. School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Part 2, Chapter 1. Author's note. Instead of creating a new story, I've decided to just add the chapters to my original story. Enjoy the story. Months have passed since the horrible night in Godric's Hollow. The boy who lived cried many tears for the first few weeks, but with the help of his new Hogwarts family, the toddler blossomed from a clingy infant into a curious boy who, in Minerva's opinion, was too brave for his good. Despite being told numerous times to not to wander off on his own, a lost and upset Harry Potter was oftentimes returned to the distressed deputy headmistress by a helpful student or a fellow staff member. Occasionally, when Minerva or Albus are both unable to look after Harry, the boy would spend time with someone from the Hogwarts staff. Finding a sitter was never a problem, as the boy was so adorable that no one seems to be able to resist him. Albus often told Minerva that they were lucky she was the boy's guardia. And as he was sure if it had been anyone else, the boy will be terribly spoiled and have the entire school within the palm of his hand by the time he was 5. It seems like there is only one person who is able to resist the charms of the Potter boy. As the youngest member of the Hogwarts staff, Severus Snape was always the most aloof and reserved member of the staff. He avoided mingling and group gatherings as much as he possibly can. Although Minerva expressed her doubts about hiring the man for the potions master position, she had to admit that he was very good in his profession of making potions. One morning late summer, Minerva prepared to review all her lesson plans in preparation for the beginning of a new term. In previous years, the process required most of the day, as Minerva was very meticulous with her plans. She expected the process to be even longer this year, as she will also be keeping an eye on Harry, who was currently playing on the floor. As she got to her desk and opened the folder containing her lessons, her fireplace sparked up and Albus Dumbledore's head appeared in the living room. The sudden flash of green of the flow frightened the young toddler and sent him running and crying to his gammy. "Oh dear. Forgive me, Minerva, I didn't mean to give the child a fright. If it wasn't such a pressing issue at hand, I would have gladly visited you and Harry personally," the headmaster stated with a twinkle in his eye. "It's all right, Albus," Minerva kindly returned as she set Harry on her hips and gently swayed him to calm him down. "He'll calm down soon enough." To Albus, Minerva looked so comfortable and natural, calming down the toddler in her arms. Her skills are admirable, especially when considering that she never had a family herself. Despite working together for numerous years, Dumbledore is still regularly amazed by his deputy. Minerva McGonagall was truly a woman of many talents. Meanwhile, in the safety of Minerva's arms, Harry's cries soon became whimpers. And the headmaster was soon pulled out from the thoughts in his mind by Minerva's inquiry. "Albus, what is so urgent that you needed to fire call? I have known you for many years and you always preferred to speak to people in person." "Yes, my dear. However, circumstances arise which prevents me from doing so today. It seems like there is trouble at the ministry and I am needed right away. Unfortunately, there is also a meeting with the Board of Governors this morning and I'm afraid that I cannot be at both places at the same time." As the headmaster said this, Minerva noticed his eyes twinkling brighter. This was not the first time that Minerva wished she was a skilled legislaman so that she could see what the man is thinking as he speaks. "And what can I do to help with this matter?" the Transfiguration professor inquired, with Harry still on her hips. "As Hogwarts deputy headmistress, would you mind terribly to take my place at the Board of Governors meeting? It is the annual start of term meeting that you've attended several times in the past. I could not think of a better replacement as we need a representative who will speak for the school. The board has always respected your opinions, sometimes even more so than mine," Albus teased. Every witch and wizard is always amazed by Albus Dumbledore's ability to have people do what he asks of them. "However, mine RVA figured out not long after working together that this was not the result of the man's power, but rather the result of his ability to bring out the best in people. He always manages to slip in one or two compliments in his requests, oftentimes hidden and not at all blunt like he trying to talk his way into someone's favor." It was one of many skills that Minerva admired in the man. "All right, Albus, where is the meeting and when is it so that I can make the necessary arrangements for Harry?" "I'm afraid you don't have much time, Minerva. The meeting starts in half an hour and it takes place in my office. I left some of the files on my desk as I assumed you want to look over them before the meeting starts. You already know the password to my office, and I've already made the necessary arrangements for a sitter." Minerva was grateful for the arrangements as she recalled that Poppy, who normally looks after the boy, was away at the moment. She was so caught up in her conversation with Albus that it was only then did she realize that Harry had fallen asleep in her arms while she was gently swaying him. Despite the boy's cherubic resemblance while asleep, there was something with the situation that did not seem right. The boy hated going to bed and it often took all of her patience to convince him to take naps during the day. Harry falling asleep so easily today disturbed Minerva, but she quickly overlooked it as she now had more urgent tasks on hand. "Who is the sitter, Albus? I cannot think of anyone else who's back so early in the castle besides Poppy and Severus, and I know Poppy left early this morning to visit her family. It can't possibly be Severus since we both know that the chances of him agreeing are as much as Poppy volunteering her services to the Death Eaters. Quote, then we must question where Poppy's loyalties lie when she returns, won't we? I have already spoken with Severus. He is expecting you in his office soon. Since you will be nearby and the meeting often lasts no more than 3 hours. He has agreed to the arrangements. Now I'll leave you to get ready. Thank you greatly for your help, Minerva." With that, Dumbledore disappeared from the fireplace. Minerva gently put Harry on the couch and moved quickly but quietly to gather Harry's things. When she was done, she considered waking the boy. However, having Severus watch over a sleeping Harry would be much better than having him watch over an over-energetic bouncy 2-year-old. Instead, she carefully picked him up from the couch and proceeded to walk down to Professor Snape's office. Harry stirred slightly from his sleep as he felt movement. However, the warm arms and the gentle movements persuaded him to remain still in his gammy's arms. Of all the interesting people he's met at the castle, he still favored his gammy. She had the most rules, but she also hugged him when he cried and kissed and tucked him in at night. Of course he received the most scolds and time-outs from her, but Harry knew that he had deserved most, if not all of them. As Minerva descended into the dungeon, the sudden drop in temperature made Harry shiver. Almost instantly, a warm blanket was wrapped around him. "Are you awake, Harry?" McGonagall heard no response but felt the boy's head nod as he rested his head on her shoulders. "I have to go to a meeting in Professor Dumbledore's office." "You're going to stay with Professor Snape? You've never stayed with him before, but I'm sure you'll be fine." Be a good boy and promise you won't go wandering by yourself. Again, McGonagall felt the head nod. Usually, he boy was full of energy and running from one place to another. However, as Minerva reminded herself, he is often groggy after waking and it always takes him a while to become his usual self in the mornings or after a nap. The two had reached Snape's office and Minerva knocked on the door. Come in, was heard immediately, indicating that the man was expecting them. Minerva stepped in and Cadet Severus standing between two cauldrons, brewing 2 potions at once. Good morning, Severus. That's quite impressive, brewing 2 potions at once. Might I inquire what you are brewing? Severus Snape was a cynical man. He always saw the worst in people and as such, always preferred to be on his own. He never showed interest in anyone's company and only ate at the Great Hall because it was part of his duty as a professor. The only person he's ever respected was Dumbledore, although he thought the man was too trusting for his own good. Minerva, he didn't mind too much. She wasn't someone you would want to cross. But she was always fair and just. It was only because of these two people that he's sealed himself the horrible fate of watching over a 2-year-old for 3 hours. Besides, he didn't really have a choice as Dumbledore simply was not going to leave him to his potions until he agreed. Hello Minerva, just a mild bruise reliever and a simple blood replenishing potion. Nothing that would harm your precious ward. Snape added. Severus smirked as he saw Minerva slightly flush about anger. He knew that was not the intent of her question, but honestly, you think the child was made from porcelain the way she, Albus, and the others had been treating him? The woman decided to ignore the comment as she quickly said, of course not, Severus. I trust that you have everything under control. With that, Minerva set down Harry's bag next to a comfortable, oversized chair and laid Harry down on the seat. I'm sure Albus has filled you in already on the details. I will be in the Headmaster's office for about 3 hours in a meeting. Afterwards, I'll be right by to retrieve Harry. I must say I was surprised when Albus told me you agreed. Thank you very much for your help, Severus. I really appreciate it. Receiving a nod as a response, Minerva futilely tried to smooth Harry's messy black hair and told him once again, Harry, I expect you to behave for Professor Snape. NLY be gone a moment and we'll be back before you know it. With a kiss on his head, Minerva left the office and quickly proceeded to the headmaster's office. Harry was confused. His gammy left him in a room he's never visited and with a scary man he's never seen. Usually, his sitters welcomed him with smiles, hugs, kisses, and sweets, but this man just ignored him. Cold, alone, and confused, Harry started to whimper. After Minerva left, Severus returned back to his potions. He only needed to add one more ingredient before one potion would be finished and he could then deal with the boy if need to. The boy seemed to be all right for the moment as he was quiet while Minerva talked. Honestly, he didn't think the woman would ever leave, the way she fussed over the boy. No wonder all the students he's had in class were brats. They've all been spoiled either by their own parents, or by the headmaster and the deputy headmistress. A child's whimpers brought him back to reality. He decided to IGN, or it as he was in the middle of cutting the final ingredient. Just a few more minutes of undisturbed work and the potion will be ready, Snape thought to himself. Harry was becoming more upset. His Himpers usually got him the attention of those around him, and if he was with Gammy or Albie, he definitely would have been in someone's arms by now. Not used to the lack of attention and comfort, Harry's whimpers soon became loud cries and wails. Just as Snape finished one potion, the boy's cries suddenly increased tenfold in volume. The boy was turning red from the wails and really looked like he was ready to tear apart his small but very powerful lungs. Dear Merlin, all babies should be banned, especially this one, as no one should be alive for causing so much noise. It was then that Severus Snape truly appreciated the thick walls of Hogwarts. He did not live near any of the other professors, but he was certain he would have heard the boys crying had he been even a floor away from McGonagall's quarters in the castle. Satisfied with his potion, he extinguished the heat and approached the child. Not one to be paternal, Severus simply patted the boy's head as if he was a puppy, and expected the crying to stop. Instead, the wails continued. Desperate to the point where he was willing to do anything to make the crying stop, Severus picked up the child and walked back toward his one remaining potion. Harry was tired from screaming. At the moment, he was content in being carried and ceased crying. When the man took him to a big pot and he saw the deep red color of the blood-replenishing potion, he was intrigued and tried to touch it. "Oh no you don't. I will not have a child meddle with a potion that required many hours to make." Despite the boy's slithering moves, Severus quickly stepped back from the potion so Harry couldn't reach it. Sensing the boy about to cry out of frustration, he quickly moved closer to the potion so that the boy could see it, but maintained a strong hold around the boy's arms. Hopefully as a distraction for the boy, Severus began reciting the remaining steps needed to finishing the potion. 8 roots of asphodel chopped evenly. Stir counterclockwise 3 times and add 2 drops of nutrient elixir. Let it sit for 30 minutes off heat and the potion will become a deep purple color. Quote, while the man was muttering to himself, Harry began to not feel so well. Normally at this time, he could be found running around and blabbering away, which Gammy often blamed on the students and the staff for giving him sweets after breakfast. Today, however, he just wanted to sleep. In the warm arms of another human being, the toddler fell asleep listening to the potion master's directions. Severus noticed a shift in weight in his arm and was surprised to see the boy asleep. He's seen the boy around and knew it wasn't normal for him to be so tamed. He put his hand on the boy's forehead and did not detect a trace of fever. If the boy wants to sleep during his watch, by all means, let him sleep. Severus then proceeded to put the child down on the chair. However, the motion woke Harry up and he refused to be put down. He liked the warmth of sleeping in the man's arms. The toddler protested to being set down by whining and wrapping his little arms tightly around the man's neck. Thankfully, Severus got the hint and spent the remaining morning carrying a toddler around with one arm and finishing his remaining potion with the other. When Minerva returned to Snape's office, she found a sleeping toddler and a very irritated potions master. Goodness, is he still sleeping? No, Minerva, I have always wanted to drug a toddler so that I can carry him around the entire morning. Minerva ignored the sarcastic remark and quickly took Harry from Severus. Thank you for watching him, Severus. I better wake him so I won't be up all night. The woman must be getting old. Don't you mean so Potter isn't up all night? Severus inquired, not that he actually cared. Minerva raised an eyebrow at the comment. Severus, when was the last time you saw a 2-year-old quietly entertain himself during the middle of the night? With that, she left the office of a speechless potions master and quickly returned to her own quarters. Part 2, Chapter 2. A.N. Thank you to those who reviewed. I really enjoy your comments. I have a few chapters for this story done but nothing definite for the end. I'm afraid this is going to be an ongoing project for weeks, months, maybe even years. I'll post whenever I have something new and hopefully it'll be good. Chapter 2. I do hope he isn't ill, Minerva thought to herself as she hurried down the halls. Upon arriving at her quarters, she quickly set the boy down on the couch and examined him to make sure he wasn't ill or injured. Harry was already displeased with having his rest disrupted and protested loudly when someone tried to put him down on the couch. When he heard a familiar voice, he opened his eyes and was glad to see his Gammy. No Gammy, no down. It's all right, dear. It's just for a moment so that I can be sure you're all right. She continued speaking to the child but did not remove him from the couch. By this time, Harry was feeling miserable, but didn't know how to tell his Gammy. He cried fervently out of frustration, even after he felt himself being lifted up and soothed and walked around the room. Minerva started to worry. The child's heart-wrenching cries prevented her from properly examining the boy, but with his body twisting and legs kicking, she could not properly do so anyways. She tried to think back to the last time he cried so much and found herself thinking back to the night that he was brought to the castle. Over the months, Harry learned to speak simple words to let others know when he was hungry, wet, upset, and so on. However, there were many more things that as a toddler, he was unable to convey to adults. As Poppy wasn't available, Minerva could not take him to the infirmary. And she wasn't sure if the situation warranted an emergency visit to St. Mungo's just yet. Shish. It's all right, Harry. You're home now. I said I would be right back to get you and I did, didn't I? Shish. Everything's all right, child. I've got you now. Calm down. Harry, relax and calm down, won't you? Minerva repeatedly spoke gentle and soft words of comfort to the distraught child, but still, the crying did not subside. "Oh, come now, Harry. What is it, dear? Are you wet? Are you hungry? It is lunchtime, so let's see if we can get you something to eat to calm you down." An hour later, lunch was left untouched, nappies were checked and changed, and lullabies were hummed, but the child was still unsettled and refused to leave Minerva's arms. As dignified and poised as she normally is, the newly christened grandmother was starting to lose her composure. She could not get Harry to stop fussing. Deciding it was time to take the child to St. Mungo's, she wrought a note to Albus and sent it with her owl. Then, with a handful of flow powder, she transported the child and herself to the underage maladies department of the hospital. Albus received the owl just as he was leaving the Ministry of Magic and apparated right away to the hospital to join Minerva. He could tell from the note that Minerva was terribly worried about the child. He too worried about the toddler, hoping that the boy whom he already regarded as a grandson would be all right. Minerva was nervously fidgeting with her hands as sat in the waiting room, dreading what the diagnosis may be. Her eyes were so focused towards the restricted exam rooms that she didn't notice Albus until he sat next to her and gently reached across to stop her anxious hands. Minerva looked sharply at the intruder who dared to mess with her at such times. Her features immediately softened when she realized who it was. "Oh, Albus, it's you." Albus opened his arms for a comforting embrace and Minerva gladly leaned into him, glad for a familiar face to share the anticipation. "Don't worry, my dear. I'm sure Harry will be all right. Now, would you care to inform an old man what happened to our dear boy while I was away?" So Minerva told Albus how unusual Harry's behavior was in the morning, but she did nothing about it as she was rushing to prepare for the meeting. While she spoke, her guilt, worries, and fear of being an inadequate caregiver manifested into tears, and in Albus's arms, she sobbed freely. "Shish, Minerva, it's all right. It's probably nothing at all and you're just worrying yourself sick. I know I'm being silly, Albus, but I can't help it. I've never taken care of a child before, and what if I did something that made Harry awfully sick and I don't even know what I did?" Her words made Albus tighten his arm around her. "You can never do such a thing, Minerva. You love Harry and everyone around you can see that. Every mother brings a child into this world without experience and they all do perfectly fine. It's only natural that children become ill at times. You can hardly blame yourself for trying to interfere with nature." The headmaster patted her arms gently and waited for his deputy to calm down. Minerva, still sniffing but no longer crying, leaned her head against the headmaster's shoulder for comfort, while he softly rubbed circles on her back to soothe her. After a bit of silence, Albus spoke his thoughts aloud. "What I have trouble understanding is how the healers managed to separate Harry from you. I have heard that only patients were allowed in emergency exam rooms, even if they were only children, because the parents were often more distressed than the patient. However, I also know my deputy and there must have been quite a scene before my arrival." Minerva blushed as she recalled her actions earlier. She had been outraged that the healers refused to allow her to accompany Harry in the emergency exam room. Unlike Albus, she had not known the rules before. Hand and Harry did not help with the matter as he refused to be taken away. In the end, Harry had to be given a calming draught, which along with his illness, made him fall asleep in his Gammy's arms. Only then did the healers take him into the exam room, while Minerva waited outside. There was a brief moment when the healers threatened to give Minerva herself a calming draught, but having taught most the staff here, a well-chosen glare was enough for them to leave their former Transfiguration professor alone. Soon, a nurse came out and called for Minerva McGonagall. The nurse was surprised to see Albus Dumbledore along with her, but said nothing about his presence. Arguably, the two most powerful witch and wizard in the world were brought into the exam room, where a tear-stained Harry Potter was sitting on a table being entertained by a healer. As soon as he saw Minerva, he cried out, "Gammy!" with outstretched arms, which she happily obliged. "Professors McGonagall and Headmaster Dumbledore, it's a pleasure to see you again. I'm Healer Bailey. I must say I'm a bit surprised to see you two as the guardians of this young boy. However, based on my own experience at Hogwarts, I'm certain that he is in very capable hands." "Thank you, Healer Bailey," Dumbledore politely replied as the two shook hands. I vaguely remember you as a student, a Hufflepuff, I believe, who was quite fond of care of magical creatures. I see that fondness has taken a turn somewhere down the road. Healer Bailey was pleasantly surprised at being remembered by the esteemed headmaster after so long. Yes, I thought I could be much more helpful to the community by healing children instead of pets. An excellent choice, the headmaster approved. And may I dare inquire about the conditions of this young patient? Dumbledore quickly asked when he saw the impatient frown on his deputy's face. Harry seems to be a unique case. At McGonagall's raised eyebrows, Healer Bailey quickly added, but there's nothing to worry about. He has the flu and is just beginning to experience the symptoms. Although his forehead remains cool to the touch, he does have a bit of a high fever. Harry is unique in that unlike most children, his forehead remains cool to touch, even with a high fever. For children like Harry, their chest will often warm up to response to the body's elevated temperature rather than their foreheads. Harry was starting to squirm in Minerva's arms, which prompted the healer to quicken his instructions. Unfortunately, being as young as he is, I would not recommend giving him the usual potions. This may be hard on you both for the next few days, but it is the best for the child. If his fever gets any higher than 101F, please flow me or bring him back and we'll make him something special. If you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you very much, Healer Bailey. I'm a bit relieved that it's the flu and not something worse, Minerva admitted. She looked a bit reluctant to add a further comment, but ultimately decided to proceed with it. Healer Bailey, I am sure that you are aware that Harry is a unique boy. While it is fine that you know he is under my care, I wish him to have the same privacy and confidentiality that every other child has. Minerva was quickly assured that no one on staff would be allowed to discuss Harry's visit today or any future visit, and that his file will be kept under an alias. Healer Bailey himself admitted that he felt sympathy for Harry as to how he's gained his fame, and while he wouldn't mind seeing him again, he hoped it would be under different circumstances. As Harry fussed and squirmed in her arms for the second time, Minerva got the message. I believe we have taken up enough of your time, Healer Bailey. Thank you once again for all your help. Yes, and please feel free to visit us whenever you like at Hogwarts, Dumbledore added. Yes, it would be nice to see the place again. Goodbye, professors. Take care, Harry. With that, the healer left the room and the three Hogwarts residents flowed back to the castle. 2 days later, the deputy headmistress felt every year of her age. Since bringing the boy back from the hospital, he had been clingy and insisted on being held all the time. If he wasn't sleeping in his crib, he was fussy in her arms and refused to be let down. For the third night in a row, Minerva woke up to the whimpers of the child. Although she was tired and desired sleep, she obligingly went to the boy to comfort him. Shish, Harry, there now, you'll get better soon. The woman cajoled softly as she walked the babe back and forth across the room, rubbing his back soothingly. How about I sing you a lullaby and see if that can get you back to sleep? The melodic and loving sounds of the woman's voice caused the child to relax in her arms, and soon, the little boy was fast asleep in her arms. After putting him back in his cot and covering him warmly, Minerva went back to her bed. Luckily, there were still a few days of summer left, and if needed, the rest of the staff would do what they could to help with preparing for the new school term. She certainly hoped that Harry would be well by the time school was in session. Despite being awakened many times throughout the night to take care of a sick child, the deputy headmistress still awoke at her habitual time of 6 a.m. She was unable to fall asleep again, so she arose to check on Harry. Unlike the few previous days, the boy was sleeping peacefully and his chest was cool to touch. Pleased that the child's fever had broke, Minerva freshened up and proceeded to her study to complete some paperwork. She never liked leaving her work for others to do and tried to finish as much as she can while the child slept. Halfway through her stack, she heard the toddler beginning to stir from his sleep. She stretched in her seat, rang for a house elf to bring breakfast to her rooms, and then proceeded to Harry's room. By the time Minerva arrived in the boy's room, Harry was already sitting up in his bed. He looked a lot better than he had been for the past 3 days, and it confirmed Minerva's guess that the worst was over. When Harry saw the woman walk in, he immediately held up his arms, waiting to be picked up. "Good morning, Harry," Minerva greeted cheerfully, entertaining the boy. She picked him up and set him on her hips while moving to the bathroom. "Are you feeling better today?" "Mornin' Gammy," Harry replied, while nodding his head in reply to Minerva's question. Speaking is a good sign, Minerva thought. As he didn't speak much when he was ill, it was a welcome change from the moaning or whining or crying in the past 3 days. Minerva felt his chest, and was glad that it was still cool. "It seems like your fever has passed. Would you like something to eat, Harry? Some toast and jam?" The toddler asked back. "Yes, dear, with strawberry jam if you wish," Minerva said with a chuckle. Leave it to a child to think about strawberry jam after hardly eating anything for the past 3 days. At this point, Minerva would allow Harry to eat toast with chocolate if it meant he would eat something. "Let's get you cleaned up and changed and then we can go have breakfast." In the bathroom, Minerva set Harry down on the counter so she can clean his face and change him out of his pajamas. As Minerva removed his pajamas, Harry became quiet and his head dropped shamefully. "What the matter, Harry? Do you not feel well?" Removing the boy from his bed so early suddenly didn't seem like such a good idea now. But his chest is still cool and his face isn't as flushed as it was yesterday, Minerva thought to herself. She was slightly relieved when Harry shook his head, but was still concerned about the change in the boy's manner. "Come, laddie," Minerva gently coaxed the boy. "I cannot help you if I don't know what is wrong." Harry spoke so softly that if it wasn't for her sensitive feline ears, she was sure she would have missed it. "Me wet." Minerva realized what was bothering the boy. She, Poppy, and Albus had all agreed that Harry was ready to be toilet trained. They started recently and it had been progressing well. The boy still wore nappies, but it was the training kind that allowed the boy to remove it himself. Although Harry was not yet 3 years old, he had easily taken to the task. He was now embarrassed about doing something he was trained not to do, and as Minerva was cleaning him, his wet training pants betrayed his deed. "Harry, it was an accident. Remember when Albus and I both told you that accidents will probably happen, and if they do, it is not your fault. You were ill and nobody expected you to leave the bed. Come now, Harry, how about we get you a new pair of training pants and let's see if we can make it through the day without a change?" The boy nodded excitedly and Minerva could sense the determination in the toddler. It had bothered her when she learned that this boy was to be the one who Albus thought would face Voldemort, but at that moment, she could not help but see the truth in the statement when she sensed the young boy's determination. Part 2, Chapter 3, A.N. I have 2 more chapters but I'm running out of ideas. Feel free to send suggestions on possible story plots. D. Chapter 3. After Harry was cleaned up, he and Minerva had some breakfast in her quarters. Harry then rested on the living room couch while Minerva did some more paperwork nearby. By lunch, Harry was restless and wanted to leave the quarters that he was confined to during his illness. He wanted to go out and play, but the frown on his Gammy's face when he asked told him the answer before she even spoke it. Sensing his disappointment, Minerva decided to take the boy to lunch in the Great Hall instead. Harry was used to being doted upon by the other professors in the school. However, due to his absence for the past few days, the professors fussed more than usual over the boy. All eyes turned to him as he tottered across the room. Uncomfortable with the attention, he tried to hide in his Gammy's robes. This greatly hindered Minerva's ability to move and forced her to pick up the child and carry him to the head table. Even in the safety of his Gammy's arms, Harry still wrapped his arms tightly around her neck and buried his face deeply in the space between her shoulder and her chin. Anyone who had thought about approaching the Harry quickly changed their mind as they saw the discomfort the boy had with the unwelcome attention. The staff proceeded through the meal as normal. Even so, Harry still refused to leave Minerva's side. When she started to set him in his seat next to her, he began to fuss and refused to unwrap his arms around Minerva's neck. "Stay you," Harry whined to his Gammy. Harry knew that his grandmother disapproved of whining, but at that point he did not care. Eating with people who often glanced at him with concern was not his idea of enjoying his time out of the apartment. Minerva was known to be strict with her students, and this did not change when it came to her charge. Even at his young age, Harry had been told that whining will not get him what he wants under normal circumstances. Of course, illness and discomforts were not considered normal circumstances. Instead, Minerva tried to reason with the boy still in her arms that it was terribly rude to eat from her lap in front of all these people. When that did not work, she considered taking the boy back to her quarters for the rest of lunch, but was stopped by Albus. "Come, Minerva, I don't know about the rest of the staff, but it's been a while since the hall has been graced by your presence, not to mention Harry's as well." The agreeing nods of the other members of the staff around the table, Minerva had no choice but to relent to their wishes, but not before reminding Harry not to make a habit of such action. As the meal started, she heard Severus, who was seated next to her, mutter not so softly that the boy was already being a terribly spoiled brat just like his father. Unfortunately for Severus, Dumbledore, who was seated on the other side of Minerva, heard the comment also and gently chided the potions professor for holding a childhood grudge, and encouraged him to keep an open mind towards Harry. Minerva, meanwhile, just glared at the man. Honestly, some men just never grow up, Minerva thought in her head. Fortunately, the rest of the meal proceeded smoothly. Harry ate little but enough to satisfy Minerva. After lunch, Minerva and Dumbledore decided to take Harry out for a stroll by the lake. The boy was very excited and proceeded to run ahead of his guardians. "Harry, you just had lunch. Please do not run and make yourself ill," Minerva called after the boy. Only giggles were heard from the child, and Minerva proceeded to comment again when she heard the headmaster chuckle from behind her. "Is something the matter with me, Albus? I would prefer to know it rather than have people such as yourself laugh at me behind my back. There are events in life that surprise us all, Minerva. I, for one, never imagined you chasing after little boys. Granted, you have always shown great concern for your students, but never have you openly expressed such concerns to anyone. I see how special Harry is to you, my dear lady. And how fortunate the boy is to have you. Let boys be boys, Minerva, for it is not often that we see such innocence at Hogwarts." Minerva silently agreed with Albus but did not refrain from also pointing out his favoritism towards the boy. "You too, Albus, adore Harry. He already has you wrapped around his little finger." Perhaps Severus was right. With so much lenience surrounding the child, I would not be surprised if one day, Harry takes advantage of his upbringing at Hogwarts. Dumbledore chuckled, offered his arm to his deputy, and the two strolled slowly after Harry. "With you as his guardian, Minerva, I have no doubt that you would not allow such horror to come to the boy." Minerva didn't say anything, but Albus sensed that she was pleased with the compliment. With so many years of friendship between them, the two could often tell what the other is feeling without vocalization. Before Minerva could change the subject, she heard Albus call out with unusual alarm, "Harry!" and run after the child. A few feet away from the professors, Harry was on his hands and knees, retching up his lunch all over the grass. Albus quickly reached the boy and sat down behind him for support and comfort. With the wave of his hand, the wizard cleared the mess and conjured up a cool cloth for the child. Harry, who was exhausted from the episode, was leaning against Albus's chest, teary-eyed. If it hadn't been such an unwelcome situation, Minerva would have surely conjured a camera to record the touching scene before her eyes. With an arm around the child supporting him, the headmaster gently applied the cool cloth against the toddler's forehead. He murmured soft words of comfort to soothe the distraught child. Harry, confused and frightened, wanted to be held. He grabbed a hold of Albus's robes and was softly crying into them. "Shish, my boy, it's all right. It was my fault that you were not better looked after. Shish, Harry. I've got you. You all right now?" Unwilling to disturb the two, who seemed to take comfort from each other, Minerva gently approached the two and set her hand on Albus's shoulder. When she caught his eye, she mouthed, "What happened?" Not wanting to alarm the child, Albus maintained his soft comforting tone as he told Minerva that the boy did not have a fever and the sickness seemed to be exercise-induced. "Are you feeling better now, Harry?" Albus asked. Minerva saw Harry nod slightly, his body still resting against Dumbledore's chest. "Next time, both of us should listen to your grandmother's words of wisdom and not run after we eat, all right?" Dumbledore gently added, to prevent Minerva from lecturing later on, both to Harry and to himself. Minerva knew what the headmaster was trying to do and gave him a half-hearted chastising look. Seeing Harry already so miserable, she decided that his intentions were right. "All right, you two, let's get you inside and cleaned up." Dumbledore proceeded to get up, but when Harry didn't let go of his robes, he picked the child up and cradled him against his chest as he brought him back to Minerva's quarters. After setting the boy down on sink counter while Minerva filled the tub, Albus then returned back to his own room to clean up himself. He informed Minerva that he would visit the two after dinner to see how the boy is doing. Harry was still a little submissive and quiet after his bath. As a result, Minerva sent for Madame Pomfrey, who had returned from her brief vacation. Although the matron declared the boy to be perfectly healthy, the protective professor still dead that the child should take it easy for the rest of the afternoon. She read 2 stories to the boy, who promptly fell asleep halfway into the second story. She then proceeded to finish the rest of her grading, but it took a lot longer than usual due to the frequent trips to check on the child. Some way, somehow, protecting the small orphaned boy had become her top priority. She knew that the child had dug the same deep tunnel into Albus's heart as well, and was glad of the fact that if Harry was ever in danger, he will have aid from people other than herself. Besides, she thought to herself, with Harry being James's son, I can use all the help I can get. Part 2, Chapter 4. Since Chapter 3 was so short, I decided that I should post Chapter 4 up as well. Enjoy. You can thank me with reviews. Chapter 4. Grandpa. Albus stopped at the door, turned around to see if there was anyone else around, and then ran his hand through his long white beard and proceeded to look confused. Harry giggled at his grandfather's antics. Who is this, Grandpa, that I hear you calling, Harry? More giggling. You, Grandpa. The boy then ran towards the headmaster. Albus gladly picked the boy up and swung him around once before setting him at his hip. I see. And may I ask what happened to Albie? Me like, Grandpa, more, was the simple reply. Despite his delight at his new title, Albus couldn't help but consider Minerva's reaction to this title change. Harry, does your grandmother have any objections to this? What's Jession? Just then, Minerva walked into the room and requested tea, milk, and biscuits from the house elf. There you are, Minerva. Might you perhaps clarify some details for me? Some specifics about becoming a grandfather. Harry insisted on calling you this after I read him a story about the adventures of a boy with his grandfather. Apparently the story reminded him of the times he spent with you. I'm sure it's just a phase and he'll eventually outgrow it. However, if you wish, I can try to persuade the child to revert back to Albie, or some other more suitable form of address. Albus couldn't help but notice a twinkle in his deputy's eye, unlike his own, when she made the last remark. If that is the case, I do hope that phase lasts for a long time. Turning his attention back to the child in his arms, Dumbledore told the boy, you have made an old man very happy, Harry. I am most flattered and hopefully can live up to the title. Now, how about some milk and biscuits, and perhaps together, we can defeat your grandmother in a game of chess. Even thou. She was busy setting up the biscuits and drinks. Minerva's response still reached the headmaster's ears. He was awfully amused when the comment sounded like, that's as likely as hearing Severus call you Grandpa. By the time Harry Potter turned 3, no one would have believed that Albus Dumbledore had once considered leaving the child at his aunt's doorsteps, to be raised in a family void of love and care. Spending time with his grandpa was one of Harry's favorite things to do, and Albus adored Harry just as much. Sometimes when the two were together, it was hard to tell which one was the adult. Of course, during such times, Minerva was always there to make sure there was some decorum in the room. Despite the length of time that Harry has been at Hogwarts, there were still eyebrows being raised when Harry referred to the headmaster and his deputy as Grandpa and Gammy, but fortunately, both the witch and the wizard were sensible people who did not care much for gossip and rumors in the magical world. They both had duties to perform, one of which was to protect and raise the boy who was everything but in blood, their grandson. And so the lives of 2 professors were enriched with the joys of raising a child. Harry was a boy who enjoyed being outdoors more than he enjoyed running around the castle. Unfortunately, due to the circumstances, he was often limited to the castle grounds. Minerva. Being the more careful and prudent of the two grandparents wanted to keep the young boy away from the public as much as possible. She knew that she couldn't protect the boy forever, she wanted him to be older before showing him the rest of the wizarding world. After much convincing from Albus and realizing that the now 3-year-old would very much enjoy a trip to Diagon Alley, she agreed to bring Harry along the next time the headmaster needed to replenish his supply of lemon drops, which happened to be the next day. When the boy found out, he dashed into his grandmother's office where she had been doing paperwork and demanded, "Weasley, Gammy. Grandpa says I can go to Diagon Alley." Weasley. Minerva couldn't help but grin at his enthusiasm. She knew that even if it wasn't true, she wouldn't have the heart to deny the boy when she's faced with such adoring eyes. "Yes, Harry, it's true. Albus needs to go to Diagon Alley tomorrow and he asked the two of us to accompany him." "Yay," the boy shouted as he jumped around in random directions. He almost knocked himself out when he lost his balance and almost bumped his head into the desk. Fortunately, his grandmother saw it coming and moved him before he could injure himself. "All right, Harry, that's enough. Why don't we get you ready for bed so you can be well rested for your first trip to Diagon Alley tomorrow?" By that point, the 3-year-old would have agreed to eat broccoli for a week if it meant that he can finally go to the candy store that all the older students were always talking about. The following morning, Harry woke up bright and early as he was too excited to stay in bed. He left his cot and went into his grandmother's room. Like all toddlers, he had no notion of time and was amazed that his grandma can sleep when Diagon Alley is waiting for them. He tugged at her arm, which was the only part of her that had not been covered by the large comforter on her bed. Minerva jerked awake to tug. Jing, and the first thought across her mind was Harry. When she realized it was still dark outside and the toddler was standing next to her bed, she automatically lifted her comforter and the boy immediately crawled next to her, nesting against her side. After a gentle kiss on the head, Minerva asked, "What's the matter, dear? Did you have another nightmare?" "No, Gammy. Want candy?" Harry received a chuckle in response. "It's too early, darling. The stores are still closed. Why don't you sleep a bit more with me and we'll leave when it is bright outside?" Seeing that he had no choice but wait, Harry tried to relax and go back to sleep. However, he kept tossing and turning. After 10 minutes of Harry rustling around her, Minerva wrapped an arm around the boy and softly patted his back while humming a light lullaby. Soon, both the child and the adult were asleep and did not awake until the sun shone brightly through the curtains into Minerva's chambers. 2 hours later, Albus, Minerva, and Harry were standing in front of the flow, with Minerva going over the rules with Harry one last time. "Remember, Harry, always hold either my hand or Albus's hand. Diagon Alley is a busy place and I don't want you getting lost." Harry nodded. "And if anyone asks for your name, my name is Evans James and I'm visiting my grandpa." "Good boy," Albus injected before Minerva could ask her next question. "And what do you do if a stranger tries to talk to you or take you away?" "No talking to strangers and make lots of loud noises if you or grandpa is not around," Harry proudly answered. "Excellent," was the reply from Albus. Minerva couldn't help but grin as the 3-year-old recited the responses that she's been trying to drill into his head. "Just one last question, my boy." Minerva was surprised. She thought that the rules she had gone over with Harry were the most important ones. Of course there were more rules she would have liked Harry to remember, but even as it is, she thought it was enough for a 3-year-old to remember. "What is your one and only task at Diagon Alley today?" Harry thought and thought, but he could not think of the answer. He looked to Gammy for help, and worried that he wouldn't be able to go to Diagon Alley because he didn't know the answer. Seeing the worry in Harry's sweet innocent face, Albus quickly replied, "To have fun, of course." Harry relaxed. It was a trick question. He giggled and flung himself at his grandpa, glad that he was finally getting to explore outside Hogwarts. With his arms full of Harry, Albus looked to Minerva to let her know that they were ready to depart. She quickly concealed his scar before flowing away to the leaky cauldron. "Now, my boy, I want you to close your eyes and hold on to me tightly, all right? It may be comfortable, but do try to keep your eyes and mouth close." "Ready, yes," was the enthusiastic response. "All right, here we go." As the two traveled by flow, Albus could feel Harry's clinging tighten as the swirling increased. He tightened his hold on the boy, assuring him that he was safe in the old man's arms. As soon as the two landed, Harry burst into tears and wails. Not wanting to attract too much attention, Albus quickly walked outside to the hidden entrance, where Minerva was waiting. There, my boy. It wasn't that bad. It's all right now, Harry. We're here. Don't you want to see how we enter Diagon Alley? Despite his misery, Harry was more curious about the place and stopped crying to see what was around him. His hands remained clutched tightly to Dumbledore's robes though. There you are, Albus, Minerva said when the two approached her. Seeing Harry's tear-stained face, she then said, I take it that Harry did not enjoy the flow. No, he didn't, but I bet some sweets would make him feel better. Wouldn't it, my boy? Harry's eyes lit up and he nodded. Before Minerva could object that it was too early, Dumbledore continued. Well then, let's not linger here. Off to Diagon Alley we go. Dumbledore opened the entrance to Diagon Alley and proceeded to swing Harry through the entrance. Appalled as she was that they were going to buy candy so early in the morning, she could not help but look forward to the day ahead as she heard Harry's giggles ahead of her. In the candy shop, Harry was intrigued by what he saw around him. Despite his curiosity, he still refused to leave Albus's arms due to the earlier flow incidents. Thus, he spent the morning seeing the wizarding world in the safety and comfort of his grandpa's arms. During lunch, however, the boy agreed to walk for the rest of the afternoon while holding Minerva's hand. Minerva chuckled as she thought she heard a small sigh of relief from Albus. I may be older and wiser, Minerva, but by no means am I getting stronger, the man said with a wink as he heard Minerva's chuckle. Just then, the headmaster saw Lucius Malfoy enter the restaurant. Unfortunately, the trio was quickly spotted and was soon approached by the unwelcome visitor. Well, isn't it a surprise seeing the power couple from Hogwarts here today, Lucius said with his typical sneer. Good afternoon, Lucius, Dumbledore replied lightly but without the usual fondness and enthusiasm that he included with his usual greetings. I needed some things from Diagon Alley and Professor McGonagall was kind enough to accompany me. He old see the forced smile on Minerva's face when she looked at Lucius to acknowledge his greeting. Why, I didn't know that you two had a child. I must question the appropriate of this relationship, headmaster. There could be a possible conflict of interest with the running of the school if the headmaster and deputy headmistress are so close together. Dumbledore could already see Minerva turning red and ready to unleash her horrible Scottish temper. Before she could do so, however, he quickly interjected. That's enough, Lucius. I am very well aware of the rules, having written quite a few myself. Despite the wide range of authority the Board of Governors may have when it comes to the welfare of the school, one of which they do not have is the personal matters of its students and staff. Now, if you would be so kind as to allow me to spend the rest of this lovely day with my brother's grandson and Professor McGonagall, I would be happy to go over any of the school's rules with you with an appointment in my office. Lucius Malfoy knew that despite Dumbledore's polite choice of words, the request was not one for permission but rather a demand for him to leave their company. Despite his fury at being ordered to leave, even Lucius Malfoy dare not openly disobey Dumbledore's requests. I will leave you to your company then, Albus. I shall see you soon. Good day, Lucius. With only Harry left with a healthy appetite, the two professors kindly waited for the child to finish before leaving the restaurant. Walking out towards the crowded streets, Minerva could not help but voice some of her pent-up anger. Honestly, the nerve of the man, approaching you and making such accusations, and in front of a child. If you haven't spoke so quickly, I would have had scheduled a lesson myself with that horrible man to teach him some manners. Now Minerva, no use worrying about spilled milk. In attempt to try to recover the mood of the trip, Dumbledore then quickly changed the subject and turned to Harry. How about the Quidditch shop, Harry? From what I have heard, your father always made it a priority to visit the shop whenever he was here. You may be too young now but I speculate that you will make many requests to your grandmother to visit this shop in the coming years. Not that she will complain, the headmaster added, with the twinkle returning in his eye. Beef. Or Minerva could dignify herself with a response. She felt Harry eagerly pulling her into the shop. For the first time that day, Minerva had a hard time keeping Harry in sight. It seemed he had lost all the shyness and insecurities that he had earlier during the day and was moving quickly from aisle to aisle, eager to see every bright and shiny broom. Seeing how there is only one door to the shop, Minerva decided to let the boy have his freedom for a moment while she remained close to the exit, ensuring that Harry did not leave the store without her. Albus had left momentarily to purchase socks for himself and for Harry. He agreed to meet the two outside the shop when they were done. Meanwhile, Minerva was engaged in conversation with the owner of the shop, debating about the Quidditch house teams this year. What no one had noticed was that a rat had slipped into the store before the door closed and was now lurking in the dark corners of the store, very close to where Harry Potter was now playing with a toy snitch. In the darkness, the rat has transformed unnoticed into a man with very important duties to carry out. As the toy snitch was flying towards the corner, Harry ran after it, eager to grab the toy. Right before Harry came upon the dark corner, however, the toy snitch suddenly changed directions and flew back towards the brightly lighted aisles. The child began to turn around to continue the chase, but a noise from behind stopped him. Glowing from the dark corner was a real golden snitch. Even from a distance, Harry could tell that this toy was a lot better than the pretend one that he had been chasing. The glow of the snitch seemed to call to him, and blindly, Harry walked towards the corner and the snitch. All the precautions that the child had recited earlier were disregarded as the child's own curiosity and desire for adventure edged him on. The object in front of him was hypnotic, drawing the boy towards it. He just wanted to touch it, to hold it. Slowly, Harry approached the gold ball, allured by its brightness. Just as he was a few feet away from his prize, Minerva called for him to leave the store. The sound of her voice broke through the trance that Harry had been drawn into. Suddenly aware of the possible dangers ahead, Harry stopped and screamed out for his gammy. It was then he felt someone grab one of his arms, pulling him towards the dark corner. The boy's scream pierced through the small shop. In a flash, Minerva outdrew her wand and ran towards the boy's scream. Harry was struggling to push something away, but it was obvious the force was too strong for the child. Minerva grabbed the child's other arm and casted a stunner into the corner. Before the spell could make contact, however, she heard a distinct pop and knew that the suspect had apparated away. The sudden letting go of one of Harry's arm caused both him and Minerva to fall back. Shocked and stunned at what had just happened, Minerva was dumbstruck for moments before registering that the child was bawling and fiercely clinging onto her. She absent-minded picked him up and soothed and murmured words of comfort to the child. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew the boy was in a lot of trouble, but she couldn't bring herself to think clearly, let alone telling him off at that point. Never before had the formidable Minerva McGonagall been shocked into silence. Out of the corner of her eyes, she saw the shopkeeper searching futilely through the shop for the kidnapper. When she saw him reaching down to pick something up, Minerva instinctively shouted, "No! Don't touch it!" Only when the shopkeeper shifted did Minerva see that it was the snitch that must have been used to allure the child. In times of danger and uncertainty, Minerva McGonagall resorted to what she did best. She suppressed all her feelings behind a wall and carried on with a firm and direct style. In an emotionless tone, she addressed the shopkeeper, "Albus Dumbledore is waiting for us outside the store. Can you please bring him in?" Within seconds, Albus walked into the shop with his wand already drawn. Detecting no immediate danger to the shop, his eyes automatically focused themselves on the two dearest people in his life. Harry, Albus can tell, had once been screaming his lungs out but due to exhaustion, was now quietly sniffling into Minerva's robes. Meanwhile, like the warrior goddess she was named after, Minerva remained standing tall, her face expressionless but arms wrapped tightly and protectively over her charge. He could see the unshed tears in her eyes. Albus Dumbledore felt rage at the perpetrator who had caused such a perfect day to end so wrongly. As much as he wanted to hold the two in his arms and comfort them, he instead gently approached them and tenderly kissed each on the forehead. Softly he spoke to the pair, "Come my dears, we cannot linger here. Both of you require Poppy's attention and the Aurors are already on their way. Let us return to Hogwarts." He hated to rush them away, but he knew that Hogwarts is the safest place they can be at this point. With a hand behind her back, he escorted the two towards the door. The woman never loosened her grip on the child, who was still held firmly against her chest. As she walked out the door, Albus could see the toddler, his head on her shoulder and his hands wrapped so tightly around her neck that Albus suspected his deputy was being slightly choked. His large green eyes still filled with tears. Harry had already created a large wet patch on Minerva's shoulder where the drops had landed earlier. Albus forced a smile when he caught the child's gaze, but for the first time that he can remember, Harry did not return the smile. Part 2, Chapter 5. Sorry for the delay. I can't guarantee any updates, but I will try to work on the story from time to time. Chapter 5. Back at the castle, Poppy released the two after a quick checkup and they had dinner in their own quarters. Albus, as usual, dined at the Great Hall, and joined the two after his meal. He entered just as Minerva finished her talk with Harry regarding the day's events, and was putting him to bed early after a long day. Despite the appearance that things had returned to normal, the headmaster knew better. He hoped that Minerva knew she needn't hide her pains and distress from him, but he was also old and wise enough to understand that old habits die hard. The best thing he could offer her now is support and comfort when her emotions finally get the best of her. Thus, the two fell into their usual routine of playing chess while sipping tea. Minerva, however, was distracted. An excellent strategist who could predict her opponent's moves before they thought of it themselves, Minerva was now quickly losing her pieces. After a mere 30 minutes, there was only one move Minerva could make and the end seemed inevitable. Never once during the entire game did Minerva's eyes leave the game board. How could I have let it happen? I should have been more careful. I should have known better. Albus knew that Minerva was not talking about the chess game. He could have been hurt. Albus. I love him as if he was my own. And it was my fault. I thought I could protect him when I took him in. Maybe I was too naive. How do you protect a child whose life was in danger before he could even walk? Minerva cried out the last words in frustration. And then she looked up and for the first time in many years, Minerva McGonagall's eyes shined with tears. Instantly, Albus expanded the comfortable seat that Minerva had occupied so that it fit them both, and went to her side. He sat patiently, softly running his hands through her long ravenous locks. He murmured words of comfort as if pacifying a distraught young child as Minerva lost her composure and sobbed wholeheartedly into the headmaster's deep purple robes. Half an hour later, the heart-wrenching sobs died down, but the headmaster did no. He stopped stroking his deputy's hair, nor did he release her from his embrace. Better now? The headmaster simply asked. He felt Minerva's head nod slightly, and then loosened his hold on her as she made an effort to remove herself from him. I'm sorry that you had to witness that, Albus. Having Harry nearly taken away today brought back memories that I did not wish to relive again, memories of my family being tortured and murdered during the last war. Albus stopped Minerva before she went too far deep into the past. He knew the fact that the McGonagalls were known for their fierce resiliency against dark wizards. And Minerva's parents were tragically murdered during Minerva's last year at Hogwarts. The girl nearly stopped her education, but with encouragement from himself and others, he managed not only to graduate Hogwarts but moved on to become one of the foremost transfiguration experts in the world. There is no need for apology, my dear. To fear is only human and you should never be ashamed of your emotions. Harry's life was in danger from the moment he was born, and we both knew that when he was brought to Hogwarts. You are as much to blame for this incident as I am for having an insatiable desire for socks. The last comment brought a small but detectable smile to Minerva's lips. The only protection that Harry needs is love. Think of all the burdens he will have to face in the coming years. The best thing we can give him is the comfort and knowledge that there will always be someone there for him. No matter what he does, no matter what happens, he will always have us, if no one else. You know, you make me feel like a little girl when you're so wise. With that, Albus knew that the insecurities that rarely surfaced had once again vanished behind the stern deputy headmistress. Just as Albus was about to take his leave, he heard a scream from the bedroom. Fearing the worst, both adults were in the room in matter of seconds, wands out and ready for war. He only movements in the room was coming from Harry, thrashing his arms and legs around in his bed, fighting off invisible enemies and screaming for Gammy. Sensing that it was just nightmares, Minerva went to see to Harry while Albus continued to scan the room for unwanted intruders. Shish. Hush Harry, wake up now. Everything is fine. You're safe. I'm here. Calm down. Dear, it's all right, am I? Nerva cooed while she gathered him in her arms. Although he was convinced that the room was secure, Albus remained in the room as he watched the two. As Minerva gently rocked the boy, his thrashing street. Often he slowly began to wake from him nightmare. As the green eyes slowly opened, Harry groggily muttered, "Gammy." Minerva never stopped her gentle rocking and petting. "Yes, I'm here Harry. Bad DWEAM, Gammy. Stay please." "Yes child, I will stay. I will not leave you, you are safe here." Although unspoken, the two professors knew that the nightmare was about the kidnapper. Harry was scared, but he was also very tired. His Gammy's voice and presence were all the reassurances he needed to close his eyes once more. Slowly, Minerva could feel Harry's body relax and his breathing slowing to even waves. A few more minutes of gentle soothing and rocking, and she was sure that the child was fast asleep. As she placed him back in his cot, she cast a soft light in the room, just in case she was needed again that night. The two adults quietly left the room. "My dear, if anything, what just happened should convince you that you are what the child needs. He trusts you and feels secure when he's with you. You are a powerful witch, Minerva. I have no doubt that you will do a fine job." As it was getting late, the headmaster headed towards the door. "Albus," Minerva called just as he reached for the doorknob. He stopped and turned around. "Thank you, for staying behind, and for everything. Both Harry and I are both grateful for your presence, and I hope that you won't ever feel left out whenever you're here. You are his grandfather and he needs you as much as he needs me, if not more." The headmaster smiled kindly. "You're welcome, my dear. These visits are as enjoyable for me as it is for you and Harry." Then, with natural ease he gave Minerva a chaste kiss on the cheek before disappearing behind her door. At precisely 6 o'clock the following morning, Minerva awoke from her slumber. She knew she would be unable to fall asleep again, so she checked on Harry and then went to her bathroom. It has been the first shower in a long time that Minerva could relax and take as long as she wanted. Since Harry was likely to sleep in this morning due to his nightmare the previous night. Feeling refreshed and awake, Minerva decided to take advantage of the peace and quiet to catch up on her correspondence. She was just about a quarter way through when she recognized Albus's firm but soft knocking at her door. "Good morning, Albus. I must say I'm surprised to see you so early. Is something the matter?" "Good morning, Minerva. I've been thinking last night regarding young Harry's safety and I believe something can be done to better protect him." Minerva was surprised. After all, she believed that Hogwarts was the safest place in the world, and until now, she thought that Albus had thought so also. "What do you mean, Albus? There's no one that he who must not be named Fae. Ours more than you and we both know that Hogwarts wards are stronger than any other dwelling in our world. What else do you have in mind?" Albus was hesitant to mention his plan. He knew that Minerva was not going to like it, but he also knew that she was a reasonable and logical woman. He had to make her see the reasoning behind his logic. There is one more protection that Harry does not yet have. For that, he needs to go back to the Dursleys. "Absolutely not. Albus Dumbledore, how dare you suggest that? You, of all people, know how they treated him. You claim you love him as a grandson and yet, you want to send the child back to those people." In her moment of anger, Minerva managed to awake the slumbering child in the next room. Both professors heard Harry fussing in the room, indicating that he was awake but cranky. "Excuse me for a moment, Albus. I shall return shortly to finish this discussion." Albus Dumbledore sighed. Convincing Minerva was not going to be easy and he does not blame her. It took a lot of willpower to convince himself to send the dear boy back to his relatives. However, when many look up to you to make the right decisions, very few decisions are easy to make. A few minutes later, Minerva returned after convincing the child to sleep for a while longer. "Minerva, it pains me just as much as it pains you to have to take Harry to that house. However, you must realize that blood protection is the only way to prevent Voldemort from physically harming Harry. Lily sacrificed her life for him, and her love continues to protect Harry to this day. If we send the child back to the Dursleys, that protection will be strengthened to the point where Voldemort will not be able to touch Harry without hurting himself. Isn't this the protection that you want for Harry, Minerva? He can see Minerva struggle with the decision. Albus, even if we do allow Harry to go to them, they will not have him. You've seen what they've done with him the first time he visited. If Harry goes back there, how long do you think he will last? They hate him. They ignored him last time, Albus. What will they do this time? Albus hated to think about what was done to the boy earlier. He knew that he had no control over the actions of the Dursleys, but this time, he was going to take measures to make sure that Harry remains safe during his stay. I dislike it as much as you do, Minerva. But it is the best protection for the child. We will take measures to protect Harry, but our powers will be limited. It would not be wise to draw attention to magic where it should not be. Minerva saw it in his eyes. The look of being forced to do something he wished he never had to do. The look of choosing what is right over what is easy. Here before her was one of the greatest wizards of all time. Looking older and more fragile than she can ever remember. Minerva understood now how much Harry meant to Albus, and how much it pained him that he was unable to do anything else to better protect the child. How long? Albus looked up from surprise but quickly answered, 2 weeks. Minerva opened her mouth to say something, and then changed her mind. 2 weeks, Albus. Not a minute longer. Dumbledore looked at Minerva and gave a sad smile. I understand your concerns, Minerva. Thank you. No, Albus, you do not need to thank me. I understand this must be hard for you also. I only wish Harry will be all right after the 2 weeks. As do I, my dear, as do I. As Dumbledore said those words, he reached for Minerva's hand, and gently patted them to reassure her that she was not going to go through this alone. And I insist that we postpone this arrangement until the child is ready. He's had enough to endure and needs time to recover. I completely agree, Minerva. Now, I am afraid that I am needed in the Great Hall. Of course, Headmaster, I won't take up any more of your time. Albus noticed the stiffness in her voice. Minerva, my door is always open for you. You know that. Yes, Albus, thank you. It's just I didn't think Harry would ever need to return there. Now you must hurry before you're late. I shall call upon you later then. With that, he left. A few weeks later, Minerva found herself explaining the situation to a very confused and frightened 3-year-old. Harry bursted out in tears once he understood that neither his Gammy nor his grandpa will be staying at the Dursleys with him. Gathering him in her arms, she gently wiped away his tears with her handkerchief and cradled him as she often did when he was still an infant. Come now, Harry, cheer up. It will only be for 2 weeks and you will have another boy your own age to play with. You don't have that here at Hogwarts. Harry sniffed. He looked straight into Minerva's eyes and asked in his innocent voice. Me go away, 'cause bad boy. The words took Minerva's breath away. The 3-year-old had considered something that neither she nor Albus thought of while discussing the plans. Harry was a very bright child and the logic made perfect sense. The fact that Harry thought that way almost made her change her mind, almost. Staring straight back into those bright green orbs, Minerva answered his question. Harry, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I will never, ever send you away as punishment. I may be angry or upset at times, but I will always love you. Always. Do you understand that? Harry nodded. He wrapped his arms around his Gammy's neck and whispered into her ears, I love you always too, Gammy. The two lingered in the moment for a few seconds before Harry returned to his position on Minerva's lap. Even at 3, he had questions to ask and Minerva patiently answered them all. She was very careful in her explanations to make sure that Harry understood he was not being punished, but that this was done to protect him from bad people. Not having remembered anything from his previous stay, Harry was only reluctant to go to the Dursleys because he would be separated from his Gammy and grandpa. However, his Gammy promised him that she will return for him after 14 days and his Gammy never lies. Thus, Harry decided to be a big boy and agreed to the stay, much to Minerva's relief. The next morning, Minerva arose early and packed a trunk for Harry, containing some of his favorite toys along with some clothing. Albus came by early in the morning and E3 enjoyed breakfast together in Minerva's quarters. Soon after, all 3 apparated to an ignored alley close to Privet Drive. Harry did not enjoy the experience and bursted out crying as soon as they landed. He refused to be put down and clutched tightly to his Grammy's robes. It took many soothing words and gentle pats on the back to calm the child down again. Minerva hoped that this would not be a prelude to the rest of Harry's time away from the castle. When the party continued on 10 minutes later, Albus walked slightly ahead, while Minerva walked with the still sniffing Harry, holding his hand tightly. She reminded him that he should be a good boy and be on his best behavior. Just before they reached the door, Minerva brought out a brand new teddy bear and gave it to Harry. "Whenever you miss us, Harry, I hope that this bear will provide some comfort." What she didn't tell the child is that she and Albus had specially charmed the toy so that she will be able to tell if the child was in trouble. The Dursleys did not want to attract the neighbors' attention by having unfit people visiting their house so often, which meant that Harry was not allowed to have visitors. Care what had happened the first time Harry had been left at the Dursleys, Minerva did not want to take any more chances with the boy's safety. "Thank you, Gammy. Thank you, Grandpa." With his free arm, Harry hugged the bear close to him. Already seeking comfort from the soft plushy toy, the three guests were coldly greeted by a grumpy Vernon Dursley, who quickly rushed them inside in order to escape the neighbors' notice. Albus had communicated with the Dursleys previously to make all the necessary arrangements so they would not have to say much in front of Harry. After forced and short introductions were made, Minerva hugged and kissed Harry one last time, and Albus fondly ruffled his already messy hair. The adults then sent the two boys to the den to play together. Albus and Minerva thought it would be for the best if they may leave unnoticed by Harry. The Dursleys agreed to it, trying to avoid a possible tantrum from the child and drawing attention from the neighbor. They know from personal experience how much ruckus a boy can make from their own personal with their own son. Just as the two professors reached the door, Harry and Dudley came out from the den. "Gammy, no go, stay, please." Albus tried to pull Minerva out the door before she could look back and change her mind, but it was too late. She saw Lily's eyes, tearful, silently pleading, even begging her to stay. It was the hardest thing she had ever had to do in her life, but somehow, she gathered all her Gryffindor courage and calmly walked back to Harry while holding back her tears. Minerva smiled kindly to the boy as she kneeled down to his level and wiped the child's tears off his face. Now, Harry, you and I had this talk before. You're a good boy and I will be back here for you in just 14 days. All right." Seeing Minerva's calm facade convinced Harry that this may not be so horrible after all. Gammy didn't seem upset about leaving him there, so it must be all right. Bravely, the toddler nodded his head as he embraced his Gammy one last time. "Good boy, I am so proud of you, Harry. Remember, Albus and I will see you in 2 weeks." With a final kiss and smile, Minerva turned her to her Harry and walked out the door with Albus. The tears flooded down her eyes as soon as the front door closed behind her. The two gloomy professors walked back to their apparition point in silence, interrupted only so often when Minerva was unable to suppress a sob. Albus wrapped his arm around Minerva's shoulder for comfort, but for once in his life, he could not think of what to say to the professor. Upon arrival at Hogwarts, each went their separate ways without the usual genial parting comments. The headmaster, silent due to the guilt of his action and the resulting grief that he had caused the two, and Minerva, silent due to her own grief and therefore unable to alleviate the guilt that the headmaster felt. Albus knew better than to follow Minerva, and sighed as both the Dursley and the staff at Hogwarts will have a very trying 2 weeks ahead. Part 2, Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Meanwhile, Harry was starting to not like the idea of playing with his cousin. The boy was easily twice Harry's size and refused to share his toys with Harry. Even worse, when he saw Harry's new teddy bear, he immediately tried to take it from Harry. However, due to a spell Minerva casted on the toy, Dudley received a mild shock each time he touched the toy. When Plump Boy cried to his mother about it, Petunia was afraid that the toy would hurt her boy and told the child to leave the bear alone. Harry did not go unpunished though. Instead, the 3-year-old received a stern scolding about not sharing his toys. As his punishment, he was put into the closet under the stairs, along with his trunk. The old man had threateningly warned them not to harm or hurt the child, but as there was nothing dangerous in the closet, the Dursleys saw it as a perfect place to keep the toddler for the next 2 weeks. Sitting alone in the dark with nothing to occupy his time did not bode so well for the 3-year-old. Harry began crying for his Grammy, and when he got no response, he cried for his grandpa also. His cries became louder and louder until finally, Vernon had enough. He warned the boy that if he didn't stop crying, then he would give him a spanking worth crying. Naturally, this made the boy cry even harder. Frustrated and eager to shut the boy up, Vernon opened the boy's trunk to see if there was anything to make the boy be quiet. When Dudley saw all the toys, however, the greedy child wanted them all. To make it up from the bear incident, Vernon thought it was a fair trade to exchange all of Harry's toys for Dudley's newly broken truck. Hoarse from crying, Harry could do nothing but try to entertain himself with the broken toy. However, he now had a new concern. He could not get out of the closet and he needed to use the loo. He cried out to his aunt and uncle to let him out to go potty, but no one paid attention to him. They refused to believe that the 3-year-old was able to accomplish a task that their gifted Dudley had not even attempted yet, and thought the boy was crying out for attention. An hour later, Petunia finally decided to check on the boy. Of course, when she saw the boy's wet trousers, she made a big fuss of what a baby he was and how she now had to spend all this time to clean him up. After a quick cold bath, Petunia proceeded to put the boy in nappies and allowed him to stay out in the living room. Dudley, who was himself wearing training pants but was really using them as nappies, spent the rest of the day teasing the boy about his accident. By the end of the day, Harry could not remember a time when he was so unhappy. He spent the majority of the day in the closet in tears. When he was finally allowed out, he was teased and pushed around by his cousin. He hated the place and was too tired to be upset. His throat was so sore from his crying and screaming earlier that he couldn't even finish his dinner, not that anyone noticed anyways. All he wanted to do was go back to Gammy and Grandpa and Hogwarts. That night, he clutched his teddy and quietly cried himself into an uneasy sleep in the closet under the stairs. At Hogwarts, Minerva buried herself in work for the rest of the day. She knew that if the child was in physical danger, the bear would portkey him back to the headmaster's office. However, she had no idea what kind of emotional damage Harry would experience at the Dursleys. Evenings were the worst. There are times when Minerva caught herself on her way to Harry's room, checking on the child before she went to bed every night. Even worse, there are times when she dreamed about Harry crying for her after a nightmare but woke up, realizing that even if it was true, she couldn't be there to comfort the child. Despite her numerous pleas with Albus, he would not allow her to check on Harry, not even in her animagus form. He reminded her of the agreement with the Dursleys that no one was going to visit the boy. However, Albus assured her that not only was the bear a portkey, but he also had Arabella Fig's staying nearby on Privet Drive in case something happened. Not having any other grounds for argument, Minerva could do nothing except count the days until Harry was safely back in her arms. On the 14th day, Minerva sat nervously on her couch, watching the clock. Albus arrived 15 minutes before they were due to retrieve Harry. He tried to engage Minerva in a conversation but her mind wasn't on it. She kept checking the clock to see if it was time. She also notified Madame Pomfrey regarding the boy's return so that nurse can examine Harry the moment they return to Hogwarts. Finally, it was time to go back to the Dursleys. This time, it was Minerva leading the way, as she had always been the less patient of the two. When they arrived at the Dursleys, Minerva eagerly knocked on the door. The fact that she heard only Dudley Dursley's voice should have warned her of what is to come. Upon their entrance, she saw Harry sitting quietly on the sofa, while Dudley Dursley was making quite a mess while playing with his toys on the living room floor. The charmed teddy bear, now darkened with patches of dirt, was still clutched tightly in the child's hands. Vernon Dursley seemed quite eager to get rid of the visitors as he had Harry's trunk all ready and waiting in the hall. When Harry saw Minerva and Albus, he fidgeted in his seat, eager to leap off and run straight to them. However, a glance in Vernon's direction made him stop himself. This did not go unnoticed by his Hogwarts guardians. Instead, the boy looked at them with his eyes pleading silently for them to take him back with them. Well, the boy is here. Unharmed and untouched, Vernon spewed. I believe we had fulfilled our part of the agreement. If you'd be quickly on your way, I must attend to my work as soon as possible. Unharmed. Minerva was furious. Harry had obviously lost weight and had lost the carefree spirit of an innocent child. He was just sitting there, like a lifeless doll, obviously held back by fear. It reminded Minerva of his first few days at Hogwarts right after he became an orphan, when everything was new and unknown. Before she could make her statement, however, Albus stepped forward and politely but without his usual warmness addressed the Dursleys for their hospitality. That's quite understandable, Mr. Dursley. If Harry is not harmed, then we shall not bother your family again. Dumbledore stated coldly, without any of his usual kindness. Vernon Dursley gave a little humph as his response. Well then, Minerva, if you would be so kind to collect Harry. I will take his trunk and we shall be on our way. We shall be in touch if need be, Mr. and Mrs. Dursley. Sending the child's new fragile state, Minerva approached Harry quietly and without sudden movements. Realizing that she was coming for him, Harry jumped off the couch and nearly leapt into Minerva's outstretched arms. Oh dear child, how I've missed you. Let's get you back to Hogwarts, all right. Harry clung onto the elderly woman but didn't speak. However, Minerva could feel the child nod in his quiet response. Minerva carefully arranged the child better in her arms, and tried to remove the dirtied bear that had nearly been dropped by the boy. However, Harry protested violently, nearly causing Minerva to drop him, when he felt his beloved friend being taken away from him. He refused to part with it for these 2 weeks so he couldn't clean it, Vernon Dursley tried to explain. I see. I'll just take his trunk and we'll be on our way, Dumbledore plainly stated. When he felt how light the trunk was, he opened it and was surprised to find it nearly empty. He looked to Mr. Dursley in inquisition. With 2 boys, you can hardly expect toys to not be broken. At least Vernon Dursley had the decency to turn red from his lie that time. No matter. We'll get Harry some more when we return. Harry, Minerva, if you're both ready then, I believe we shall leave promptly. Holding tightly to Harry, Minerva quickly walked out the door without a word. She didn't trust herself to speak kindly, so she wisely chose not to speak at all. Behind her, she heard Albus, his voice now not kind nor genial. Good day, then Mr. and Mrs. Dursley. I shall be in touch again if circumstances dictate it. And certainly, once Harry's needs have been addressed. Minerva thought. She failed to notice the sudden paleness that had overcome both Mr. and Mrs. Dursley's faces. Hold on tightly to me, Harry, we're going to leave now, Minerva softly stated to the child, while her arms automatically tightened around the child. Whereas the child had made a big fuss his first time apparating, he only let out a small whimper the second time around. Minerva doubted that it was due to a quick change of opinion. Ey arrived just outside the castle's ground and Minerva walked briskly towards the entrance. She wanted Harry to be examined by Poppy right away, as she was certain something was wrong. Albus Dumbledore wisely decided to silently follow her. Once Harry was in the hospital wing, both Poppy and Minerva unsuccessfully tried to coax him into releasing his hold on Minerva's robes. In the end, Albus had to sneak in a mild sleeping spell on the child so that Poppy could properly examine him. Once Minerva was free, she immediately went to Albus and warded the area off with a spell to silence the yelling that she was sure to do. Albus Dumbledore, I warned you against sending Harry back and you assured me he would not be harmed. The child hardly speaks. He may be physically alive but he is not the same child that he was 2 weeks ago. If Harry does not get through this, Albus Dumbledore, I am going to take him away from this place and you will not find us. The headstrong deputy headmistress was not finished. Oh, and you can tell the Dursleys to expect a visit from me if Harry doesn't recover. Except mine won't be nearly as nice as yours, Minerva threw out before ending the spell and returning to Poppy to check on Harry. Leaving the old man still flabbergasted over the rarely exhibited Scottish temper. Madame Pomfrey was just finishing up with Harry when Minerva returned. How is he, Poppy? Physically, he's dehydrated and a bit malnourished. It can easily be taken care of with a potion. Other than that, no bruises or broken bones. He does have a nasty nappy rash though. I thought you stopped using nappies on Harry. Minerva, I did. The Dursleys must have put him back in it. No matter now. You said physically, Poppy. Do you mean there are other damages as well? Physically, Harry would recover quickly. However, you saw how he was when we tried to separate you two. I believe he's very vulnerable emotionally. You will have to be patient and observe him for a while to assess his emotional state. A horrible thought went through Minerva's head. From the corner of her eyes, she could see Albus's expression change as the possibility ran through his mind. Poppy, you don't mean that Harry was. Oh, thank heavens no, Minerva. I just meant that the experience has obviously affected Harry physically, but more importantly, it's changed him emotionally. I can treat him for his malnutrition and such, but I'm afraid it'll be much longer before he returns to the happy carefree boy that he was. But he can recover? Minerva asked. That would depend on those around him. As you can see, he's awfully quiet and won't allow many people near him. These first few days will be critical as he reassesses his environment. He has to learn to trust again, I'm afraid. Seeing Minerva's nearly in tears, Poppy hurriedly added, however, as he clung so tightly to you, it is an indication that he seeks you as a source of protection. Minerva absent-mindedly nodded her head as she processed this information. Thank you, Poppy, for your help. I don't know what I would have done if you weren't around. No need for thanks, Minerva. If this boy was anything like his father, I shall expect to see much of him in the years ahead. I'll give you the potion and salve that Harry will need. If you need anything, I am happy to help. You and Albus aren't the only ones who are fond of the child, you know. Minerva gave Poppy one of her rare smiles. I know you adore Harry, Poppy. He is very fortunate to have you as one of his aunts. Good night, Poppy. Albus, she added at the last minute. Out of courtesy but clearly not hiding her discontent, Minerva carefully picked up the sleeping child to return to her rooms. She set him on the sofa, careful to tuck the now clean bear under his arms. The sleeping spell that Albus casted should wear off before long. Sure enough, just 10 minutes after arriving back in her quarters, Harry began to stir from his sleep. Unsure how the child would respond with an overlooming shadow over him, she chose to observe the child quietly from her desk not 10 feet away. The first thing Harry noticed was how soft and comfortable his bed was, and how the blanket kept him warm. Trying to remember what had happened, the child's last memory prior to falling asleep was how people tried to take him away from his gammy. Quickly, his comfort turned into fright and fear, especially since he did not recognize this room. In a moment of panic, he looked around for his gammy. When he found her coming around her desk and approaching him, he instinctively reached out for her and held out his arms for her to hold him. Then suddenly remembering his aunt and uncle locking him away from making loud noises, Harry's loud boisterous cry quickly turned into a soft pitiful whine. He dropped his head and arms as no one had responded to his cries for the past 2 weeks. Minerva could see the shift from comfort to fear in the child when he first awoke. She got up, quickly to go to him just as Harry had found her. She recognized the outburst, as Harry had frequently made loud outbursts to let all know when he was awake and wanted to play. As she nearly reached him, he suddenly became much quieter and he made noises that sounded like whines from an injured animal. And the child's face just fell. Minerva was shocked at the transformation in the boy's character in just 14 days. Whatever the Dursleys had done, they had definitely left more than just a lasting impression on the child. She quickly hurried to her grandson's side to comfort him. There, child," Minerva cooed as she picked him up and settled him on her lap. Gently lifting his chin so that the teary green eyes were looking at her, she stated, "You're safe at Hogwarts now, Harry." Minerva let go of his chin and cuddled him a bit closer. "I'm here, child. You're not alone. It's all right, darling." She rocked him back and forth as the tears dried and he began to calm down. When he stopped sniffling and began to grow restless in her lap, she stopped. "Better now." Another nod. "Then let's get you cleaned up and have lunch, shall we?" She received no response from the child, his large green eyes staring at her, as if he's trying to decide whether or not she was trying to deceive him. "Oh Harry, what have they done with you, child?" Minerva could not help but let out a sigh as she carried Harry to the bathroom. As Minerva turned on the tap and waited for the bathtub to fill, she began to help Harry with his clothes. Leaving his shirt on, she sat him on the toilet, as she usually did with the boy after a nap. Harry used it without needing any further prompt. Minerva was surprised that the boy hadn't asked to use it earlier since it was obvious that he needed it, but she did not pursue it further. She praised Harry when he was done and helped him remove his shirt. As Minerva lifted Harry into the tub, he started whimpering again and clung to her robes. After letting him bury himself into her robes for a few minutes, she tried to coax the child into testing the waters. She put her own hand in first to show that the water is fine, and even allowed him splash the water a bit as he leaned over the side of the tub. After deeming that the water was safe, Harry finally allowed himself to be placed into the tub. Minerva could have finished grading an entire class's worth of homework assignments in the amount of time it took to get Harry settled into the bath, but she did not care. She was determined to not let down the child in front of her again. Harry remained subdued during the bath. He ignored the toys that have been silently waiting for him for 2 weeks, and he didn't make much noise. Minerva felt like she was bathing a doll instead of a toddler. She kept encouraging Harry to play with the toys, to even splash the water around. Although he did do these things after Minerva mentioned them, she couldn't help but feel that he was only doing what he was told. Minerva was very careful not to get soap suds in Harry's eyes when she was washing his hair, but when the boy squirmed unexpectedly, some of the suds inadvertently found their way in. Remembering how loudly the boy used to cry whenever his eyes were irritated, Minerva quickly acted to soothe the child before the crying escalated. To her surprise, Harry did not make a sound. His eyes were firmly shut from the pain, and Minerva could see the tears in his eyes when he opened them again, but again, the situation seemed out of place without the loud wail from the child. "Oh dear, I'm sorry Harry, please, say come closer so I can wash out the suds, child." As Minerva reached to pull the child closer, Harry unconsciously backed away from her and let out a small whine of protest and fear. It hurt Minerva dearly to see the child pull away from her. In the softest and most gentle voice that she can manage, she dropped her hands in the tub, her motions in plain sight of the child. "I'm not going to hurt you, Harry. I just want to make your eyes feel better. Will you allow me to do so, child?" Harry very much wanted to allow her. Aunt Petunia never cared if there was shampoo in his eyes. She would just call him a crybaby and let the boy's own tears dilute out the irritant. Gammy, however, apologized and offered to help him. She sounded sincere about it too. For the past 2 weeks, he thought about his Gammy every day and could not understand why she left him there. She told him that it was safe and keep away the bad man, but he was frightened and sad every moment he was there. At that moment, the miseries and unfairness he had suffered in the past 14 days surfaced, and his whimpers quickly escalated to heart-wrenching wails. Harry was crying so hard that Minerva had feared she had seriously injured his eyes. She rised to Flo Poppy for the emergency, but soon found her arms full with her soapy and slippery charge. "No go, Gammy, stay, no leave me, no leave me," the child kept repeating, over and over. Ignoring the mess on her robes, she hugged the child tightly to her. "Oh Harry, my dear boy, I'm not going to leave you. I'm only getting Madame Pomfrey to look at your eyes, but I will come back to you. I will always do my best to come back to you, Harry. Always." Unsure if the child was shivering from crying so hard or from the cold, she summoned a towel and draped it across the child. "Shish. It's all right Harry. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." After a while, Harry calmed down and Minerva could feel him relax a little. "Now, I think a certain little boy has been in the tub long enough. Shall we rinse you off and get dressed?" Harry nodded his head once again and proceeded to do as he was told. Unfortunately, in his haste, he nearly lost his footing in the tub. If it wasn't for Minerva, he surely would have had a nasty bruise, if not a broken bone, from his spill. "Oh, do be careful dear. No need to hurry. Now, you have your footing. Good." Afraid that Harry would slip again, Minerva kept at least one arm secure around the child. The warm hugs and gentle voices are such a contrast from the Dursleys that Harry couldn't help but lean into the welcoming gesture. With the child all clean, Minerva quickly dried him off and carried him out into the bedroom. She dressed the boy in a soft red shirt without troubles, but when she proceeded to put underwear and pants on the child, Harry looked surprised. Aunt Petunia didn't trust him without a nappy on, and even then, she didn't change him very often. Harry hated it, but there wasn't much he could do about it. He discovered early on that the more he fussed, the longer she would wait between the changes. No nappy? Harry questioned Minerva. No nappy, Harry. I do not think you need them, and you were certainly sufficient without them before. I don't know what Petunia was thinking, but you're with me at Hogwarts now. For the first time that day, Harry smiled. A very brief but genuine smile that nearly brought tears in Minerva's eyes. After getting dressed, Minerva lifted him off the bed and set him down on the floor. As much as she would like to spend the rest of the day cuddling the child, she knew the boundaries of being loved versus being mollycoddled and spoiled. How about we get something to eat now, child? Harry didn't comment and walked with her, but she did notice that he had a hand clutched to her robes. She gently loosened his hold on her robes and held his hand in hers instead. At lunch, Harry made no requests but took a bite of whatever Minerva put on his plate. He ate less tea. She would have liked, but she didn't want to push the child. After some prompting, Minerva did manage to have the child ask for ice cream for dessert. She ordered an ice cream sundae, partly to reward the child and partly to indulge him. The look on Harry's face when he saw the ice cream was almost enough to entice Minerva to order it at every meal. Mine? Harry asked, not believing his eyes. Yes, Harry, a treat just for you for being a polite and good little boy, she added to reinforce the idea into the child's head. No, Dooley. Harry still could not believe that he did not have to share. No, dear. No, Dudley, Aunt Petunia or Uncle Vernon. I'm sorry that you had to go through those 2 weeks with them. It was a mistake sending you there, and it not going to happen again. Do you understand, Harry? He nodded his head, but his face showed no expressions. Minerva felt a moment of sadness, as Harry either did not understand her or did not believe her. Despite her own feelings, she I led at the boy and encouraged him to dig into his ice cream. Harry carefully scooped a small bit of ice cream into his mouth, without showing any of the gusto that a toddler should have shown when presented with the treat. He still carries with him the lessons he's learned from the Durleys, Minerva observed. Just as Harry had taken his third bite, there was a knock at the door. Minerva started call for a house elf to look after Harry as she proceeded to answer the door. However, as she stood up, Harry immediately dropped his spoon and lifted his arms to be taken out of his chair. It's all right, Harry, I will be right back. I'm just going to open the door. I will call for Binky to stay with you. Upon hearing that, Harry started to fuss in a panic and frantically bouncing up and down in his chair, desperate to be let out. Quickly grabbing the child to prevent him from falling out, Minerva was surprised at strength that Harry clung to her with. The child gripped to her robes as if his life depended on it, wrapping not just his arms around her, but his legs as well. Oh, Albus, I warned you that the Dursleys would not be safe for the child, and yet, you insisted on sending him there. It's my fault too, for allowing this to happen, Minerva thought to herself as she held the child tightly. Getting to the door with the child clinging to her, Minerva was surprised to see Albus Dumbledore on the other side. The man had left them alone so far, supposedly to allow Harry to readapt, but Minerva also suspected to avoid her wrath. Good afternoon, Minerva and Harry, my boy. How are you both doing this lovely afternoon? Harry responded by trying to snuggle even closer to Minerva. Minerva gave Albus a look that said, see for yourself, old man. Ah, well, if there's anything you need, Minerva, please allow me to help. Quote, as if you haven't helped enough, Minerva thought. However, never one to be rude, she replied instead, I think we're managing all right, Albus. As she stated this, she couldn't help but notice that for the first time, the headmaster appeared as a lonely old man. I am certain you both are, my dear. However, if you would allow me a few minutes of your time. There is something I wish to discuss with you. Seeing her glance towards Harry, who had no intention of leaving Minerva's arms, Albus added, Harry may stay if he wishes. As the two adults and child settled comfortably on the couch, Albus started speaking. Minerva, you have every right to be upset at me for my mistake. You argued against leaving Harry at the Dursleys and I disagreed with you. However, I want you to know that had I only did what I thought was the best for Harry. What I did may be unforgivable, but I hope you know that I adore the child and would never intentionally hurt him." It took Minerva a few moments to process everything that Albus had just said. It's been a while since she heard Albus discuss so much about his own feelings. I'm not certain what to say, Albus. I'll lie and say that I'm not angry at you for what happened. However, we both took Harry to the Dursleys and left him there. I suppose the mistake we both made was believing that the Dursleys possess even the tiniest bit of kindness and humanity." Minerva sighed, and then continued. "I was a bit harsh with you earlier, Albus, and I do apologize. No one doubts your adoration of Harry, but this is not my decision to make. It's his. It is up to him to decide who he trusts again, myself and you included." "I understand, Minerva. I just hope to have the chance to make it up to him." "As do I, Albus, as do I." She smiled and then realized that the toddler had nodded off while the two adults were talking. Remembering what happened earlier, she decided to place him once again on the couch where he won't wake up alone. Before Albus left, he transfigured a pillow into a stuffed phoenix. "I assume that Harry will not be ready for a visit to Hogsmeade anytime soon. I shall leave him with this now, and send for more toys tomorrow." As he walked out the door, he saw from the corner of his eyes that his deputy carefully set the phoenix beside the sleeping child, next to his newly scourgified teddy.